are in Baird Country. Okay, so welcome. Today we have a guest that needs no introduction. We have Bob Izumi. He is a professional fisherman, a longtime tournament angler, a host of the Reel Fishing Show that ran for many, many years, Reel Fishing Magazine, favorite at trade show presentations, seminars, you name it. Just an awesome guy to boot. Bob, welcome to the show.
Well, Jim, it's a pleasure to be here and to meet you in the flesh. I mean, we've talked on the phone, and as much as I know you like fishing, seeing some of your videos, I like what you do, but only from a distance, okay? And I think of adventure.
Yeah.
I think of, pillow top mattresses and hotels occasionally, fine meals, not, what I can scrounge up in the middle of some wilderness as you do at times. But you know what? I do spend a lot of time in the outdoors. I was trying to do the math the other day of my 40 some odd years of being a full-time angler, doing this for a living. And I forget how many days I've spent on the water, but I think I came out to like 6,000 or 7,000 days I've been on the water.
Wow.
With tournament fishing, filming shows. We did just a TV show alone in 38 years. We shot just under 1,000 episodes.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that is true, but I've heard some of your stories. Like you are on Lake Erie, 20 kilometers from Detroit. And you're somewhere around Pelee Island, and you're in these massive waves out there in a bass boat.
Guys got to do what a guy's got to do when it comes to catching fish. And that was a tournament back at the Everstart Bass Tournament Series. It was out of Detroit. 50-mile-an-hour winds out of the west. Yeah. They said, go for it, guys. So about 180 boats went out that day, if I remember correctly. And I ran to Pelee Island. It's not 20 kilometers, so about 20 miles out.
20 miles.
Yeah, out in the middle of Lake Erie from the Detroit area.
Yeah.
And it's like 15-foot waves. And they're not rollers. They're breaking on top. These are waves, like, Hawaii 5-0 waves, right? So I'm out there in a 20-foot Ranger bass boat with a 250 Merc, and I'm running out there up and down. You'd go down in the swells, and you see nothing but a wall of water around you. Then you'd come up, and you'd go over the breaker, and then you go down. Took a long time to get out there. I got on the lee side of Pelee Island to where I wanted to fish, and my co-angler, who was a draw for partner type format tournament, bass tournament, was with me. And I can't recall who was with me because I fished hundreds and hundreds of these events. But I'm sure that they weren't very comfortable because even driving that day, I wasn't that comfortable because it was extreme.
Yeah. And you're still going. You're still at first when I heard the beginning of the story, I thought you're just trying to get out of there, but you're trying to get in there so you can still fish.
Yeah, we went right out into the middle of the waves, like out where it's really rolling. We get around the island, and it's the calmest side of the island, but the Pelee Island's a fairly flat island. It's not got hills or anything or big hills. So the wind's whipping across it, and you're standing 50-mile-an-hour winds leaning like this into the wind trying to fish. Neither of us caught a fish. We made it back to the weigh-in at 3 o'clock or 3:30, whenever our check-in time was.
Yeah.
On time, through those 15-footers going back.
Yeah.
And 90 some odd boats or 100 and some odd boats, something like that, did not catch a fish that day. So I guess we were in the majority of not weighing in a fish. The guy that was leading at fish right there at the ramp, he literally caught almost 20 pounds for his 5 bass right there where we launched, within 5 casts of where we launched.
Risking his life at all.
And he didn't burn any gas either.
Yeah.
And his life was definitely not at danger. He stayed in the Detroit River. So we've done crazy things like that.
That's nuts. I would be terrified. I'd be worried that the boat would swamp. I guess your bilge pump is pumping water out.
Yeah, but the problem is if you did swamp, they have level flotation, but you'd still be up to the gunnels in water.
Right.
It would still be floating the boat, but the waves coming over your head and everything might not help.
At least there'd be wine if you were to swim to shore at Pelee Island.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
you could just go hide in the vineyards and go to the closest winery and drink yourself happy or warm.
Yeah.
But what happened in other tournaments is like on the St. Lawrence, I fished tournaments out of Morrisburg before where we'll run out Lake Ontario and fish some of the islands in that New York.
Around Wolf Island there near Kingston? Or?
Oh, yeah, but we'll go beyond that out to Main Duck and way out to Galoo and Stony Islands and do a milk run. But that's a 250-mile round trip in one day in a bass boat.
Wow.
So you're going wide open in the morning when it's calm in the St. Lawrence River, 90 miles in the river, then you're going way out in the lake and you're fishing some areas you have to gas up on the way out, gas up on the way back, and you're spending a ton on gas. And you've only maybe have 2 hours to fish because if there's any waves, like 2, 3, 4 footers, it slows you down. You're not running 65, 70 mile an hour.
But you know you're trying to get to where the fishing is going to be good. So
you're better as
yeah.
soon as you get there, Jim, you want it game on. You just got to catch a bunch quick.
Yeah.
Keep the 5 heaviest and get the heck back in time where you're penalized in these tournaments. Usually half a pound or a pound a minute for every minute you're late. So depending on the event, the rules are a little different. But usually, anywhere from even 4 ounces, 8 ounces, up to a pound a minute. So you want to be back on time. You don't want to be late. And done a lot of those runs, 250 miles in a day. So my adventure is...
Sounds like a lot of fun.
Well, your adventure is usually with a paddle when you're on water.
Yes.
And going through those rapids, which can be life-threatening, right?
Well, yeah, if you lose your boat, you're in the middle of nowhere, or, you drowned. You typically wouldn't be what happens. I mean, it does, but it would be like, okay, I'm all right, but my canoe, after I tipped in this rapid, went over a waterfall, smashed into pieces. I don't have my food. I don't have potentially my communication equipment. All I have is whatever survival gear I have on me. Maybe I'm wet. Maybe I'm hypothermic. I got to get a fire going, build a shelter, maybe walk out 100 miles through the bush, or hope that I could signal a plane with a little pen flare, so you could wind up in that situation. But the situation, this is probably why I'm interested in these big water stories, is because that's what scares me the most is, it's not necessarily tipping in the rapid that's dangerous when you're on a remote canoe expedition. It's those big open water crossings, because especially once you start dealing with frigid water and, a storm blow up and you're in the middle of, I don't know, some large body of water, maybe Lake Superior, maybe something further north, you tip. I mean, there's no way you can get to shore before you have hypothermia. And so that's the dangerous thing, for the most dangerous for me.
That's why I've got that big outboard motor on the back to get me back in, hopefully. And I've never been stranded on big water I've been with Mercury for like 40 some odd years. I've never been stranded, knock on wood. They've been really good to me and still work with them to this day. But the thing is that, you have so many elements working against you for your adventures, including the moving water, the rapids and stuff, and then the big water on open areas of lakes that you're crossing. In our case, we're doing things like tacking the waves. So if you've got 5 footers coming at you and they're fairly close together on a shallow lake like St. Clair or Erie, and the waves are coming at you this way, sometimes it's best to run the troughs this way and then run the troughs this way.
So tack into them almost, essentially.
You're tacking pretty well.
I would agree. If you take it straight on, you tend to take in more water.
That's when you can dip the nose of a bass boat and take the water on. Another thing is using the power trim and tilt on your outboard so that you're keeping the nose up, but down to cut the waves, but up high enough to go over the waves.
So you're trimming your motor up.
Trimming the motor in all the way, and then just bringing it up enough that you want to keep the bow up a little bit, but not all the way down. And it actually is a bit of an art running rough water in these tournament bass boats that we've run. And keep in mind, though, Jim, I've done this my whole life, is run big water. I grew up down on Rondeau Bay on Lake Erie, fished Lake St. Clair and that. And then a lot of my biggest wins in tournaments are on Lake Ontario and St. Lawrence River.
Bay of Quinte and stuff, right?
Yeah, Bay of Quinte, Lake Ontario, out of Kingston and that, St. Lawrence. And so I grew up, here I am now, mid 60s, and I'm still fishing big water tournaments, but I love big water. Sturgeon Bay, Wisconsin. Me and a buddy, Derek Strube, go over there every year for over a decade now to fish the big open bass tournament there. And you're right on, Lake Michigan, and it's big water, but it's fun fishing.
Yeah. And there's bigger fish. And the bigger the lake, the more chances are there's going to be bigger fish, and, more food for them, essentially.
Well,
right?
It's funny you say that because, see, you get it. With your adventures, you've gone up there to the Yukon and caught those big char. And they're giants. Although the water's cold, they don't have the fishing pressure. And they're in water that can sustain and grow big fish. Great Bear Lake.
Wow.
You've been there.
I have. I ice fished Great Bear Lake. We didn't have a ton of time to do it, to ice fish, but I mean, we pulled 10, 15 pounders out of there within a matter of a few minutes of fishing.
I know.
Yeah. And those are small for Great Bear, right?
They are. Like, they're talking 20, 30, 40-pound fish that swim around there.
Yeah.
Yet, once again, gigantic lake grows big fish. Lake Nipigon, big brook trout. And having fished all these places for char and Great Bear and all these places that have big water, the ocean, of course, and stuff, is I kind of get a thrill out of fishing bigger water bass tournaments because of the fact that you're going to catch bigger fish at those tournaments. Now, that's not to say a little lake, back in, the woods can't harbor big fish, but it might only have a few.
Right. Well, the Ontario record was caught out of a small lake in southern Ontario, right?
And that's like a unicorn, though.
Right.
Right.
Okay.
It's like getting a 7-foot-something-inch basketball player. There's just not that many of them.
Right.
And that's the way with a giant fish in a small body of water.
Yeah.
It has just survived all odds.
Right.
To get that big, because usually smaller bodies of water have more stunted fish, because maybe if they don't get a lot of pressure, there's just too many of them and not enough food.
Not enough nutrients for them to grow as big. Right?
Well, nutrients, that's a funny one, because you take the Great Lakes, for instance, and you've got, Toronto and Detroit and Kingston and Green Bay and all these cities around the Great Lakes.
Right.
And as much as there's pollution and a little bit of sewage and things like that might seep into the lake, that actually makes a lot of these lakes more fertile, and farmland rolling in from people living around them, and all the farmland and stuff and the creeks and that. It adds a lot of food for the bait fish.
Well, because it increases the algae, right?
Right.
But if there's too much algae, doesn't that starve some of the fish for oxygen? Or
it does. But see, what's happened, like in when I was really young as a kid growing up on Lake Erie, it wasn't a walleye factory like it is now. And what happened is a lot of that algae disappeared, and evolution and foreign things like zebra mussels and that, and gobies getting into the waterways from the ballast of these ships from Europe and stuff, have cleaned it up in a lot of cases.
Right.
And so the walleye have flourished, the smallmouth bass have flourished, and the big muskies around Buffalo, and all these things that have happened over the years. It's actually, in a lot of cases, the fishing's got better around the Great Lakes over the years.
Well, they've cleaned up too, right? Like they're not as bad as they were at one time, right?
No, I was at the Toronto Boat Show this past weekend, and they had this inland lake, and they said all the water in this big arena that they had flooded to use some electric boats and stuff, and we were testing that new little electric Avatar in there. Is the water was looked like drinking water, and it was like Ontario water. And I don't think they would have filtered. I think they would have just pumped it straight in there, like probably.
Well, Georgian Bay is gorgeous, you know, nice and clear, and you can swim in it. That doesn't have the same issues that maybe Lake Ontario might have in some areas, right?
No, and we're pretty blessed with some amazing fishing around this big water that surrounds us here in, this whole sort of Ontario and surrounding areas. But, where you've gone on some of your adventures, though, you've seen the same thing where lack of fishing pressure grows big fish. Like, did you catch some big char when you're up there in the Great White North?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember my brother and I were actually up on Victoria Island, which is divided between Northwest Territories and Nunavut. And we got dropped off by a float plane out of Cambridge Bay. Mm-hmm. This is just the two of us. I think this was 2008. Didn't have much money. We decided it'd be a great idea to put the whole trip on our credit cards, which was like $7,000 each.
So this is like 10 years before you won the Alone series.
Yes, absolutely. And so we get dropped off by this float plane pilot after this crazy flight up. We're just in the barren lands. We're not even on the main land anymore. We're in this massive island. It's bigger than Great Britain. And we asked the guy, we land on this lake and we ask him, you think there's any fish in this lake? There's still ice on it in places. And he's like, oh, I don't know. It looks deep enough. So we light out. It's like 3 a.m, still light out. Okay, well, we better get some sleep. Well, let's take a few casts. Let's take a few casts. We go out there. First cast, giant Arctic char. I'm fighting it. It comes up to the canoe, jumps over the canoe in between my brother and I, and then gets off and goes away this way. And we're just like, wow, right? And
First cast.
And then there was a hatch at this time as well, right?
Right.
So we were just looking to where there'd be all these sort of groups of bugs on top of the water, and we'd cast at those bugs.
Right.
And sure enough, wham, we'd hit one, the odd big laker. And, we probably didn't catch anything gigantic or anything, but just the sheer numbers, the odd big laker would run out our spool. And there's us on day one. We probably could have caught enough fish that day to like have enough food for the entire month-long trip if we wanted to. Of course, we just kept a couple. We ate them for dinner and then breakfast the next day. But I think what happened to a lot of those char were kind of almost stuck in that headwater lake, waiting for the water to come up so they could run back to the ocean.
Right.
And so when we got downriver, there wasn't as many char, but it was just lake trout. And you'd see them. Water was so clear. You'd start fishing and you'd just see them whoosh like this, all coming for your. And then one would bite it, and then the other one would try to be biting it in the other fish's mouth.
And how close were people to where you were fishing? Like anybody lived near there?
Well, the closest community was an Inuit hamlet called Ulukakto, which was probably, a couple 100 miles, if not more away. And there's 300 people live there.
Never seen a lure probably before.
Never. Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that's how special is that?
Yeah, it's pretty awesome just to know that there's, still places like that.
So needless to say, that trip you ate better than what you did when you're 75 days in the bush with your brother.
100%. Much, much better.
Okay, I got to ask.
Yeah.
75 days.
Yeah.
On that Alone series, I believe History Channel?
Yep, you got it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Season 4.
So you won $500,000 between the two of you.
Right.
75 days. You're still brothers. That can't change. Still talk to each other.
We do. Yeah, we do.
Okay. Communicate. Go on the odd trip still. I think. Because I saw a video that looked like it was more recent.
Absolutely.
2018.
Yeah.
What kind of food were you eating? I haven't seen the show. So what kind of food were you surviving on for 75 days?
Yeah. So, basically whatever we could get our hands on. I had to do this huge trek to meet my brother. And on that trek, I was getting a lot of just wild mushrooms. So really good that I put a little bit of extra time into finding out what's
buzz off these things.
No, they weren't the magical variety ones.
These are just edibles.
Which I don't know if that would have been good or bad out there. Probably bad. Maybe it would have eased the suffering. But at this point, it was at the beginning. So I still, it's amazing.
Raw?
Well, I would cook them. So I had
now that's another question.
Yeah.
Did they give you something to start a fire with?
So all we had was a little ferro rod or a ferrocerium rod, which just throws off sparks. Better than flint, but not as good as a lighter, although it doesn't break like a lighter could. And it'll work if it's wet and stuff like that. But we're in a rainforest. We're in northern Vancouver Island. So trying to, there's no birch bark. Nothing's dry. So trying to get a fire going when everything's soaked is a very long process because you got to find a standing dead tree. You got to set up a tarp, which luckily I had.
Yep.
And then you got to cut down a standing dead tree and cut it up, split it open and get the very middle of it. And that's going to be dry. And then you have to whittle out matchstick sized pieces and then kind of whittle what they call feather sticks, which are they just kind of carve it and let that wood curl until there's a bunch of curl pieces, and that'll take the the spark. Right. So it's like a 2-hour process just to get a fire going. So then I had a little metal water bottle that could work as a pot as well. So I put all the mushrooms, I collected them in a little gator, like a leg gator, and I tied it up here, and I didn't use it as a gator. I used it as a little bag, and I get oyster mushrooms, winter chanterelles, put them in the odd slug. I was eating slugs out there, which are like, if you think eating a slug's disgusting, you're absolutely right. It's disgusting.
Right.
And then I boil them all up and eat them, and they weren't the best. And then I'd leave
Not
the rest of them.
like?
No. And I'd boil the mushrooms, and then the next morning, I didn't have time to make a fire in the morning, so I'd put the leftovers in my hat. And the next morning, I just eat these cold, soggy mushrooms with like the odd slug in there, and then I just go.
Right.
And then when I got to the campsite, we got fish, these gunnel fish, and we're eating stuff when the tide was low. So we're eating limpets and these other things they call chitons or gumboots, but none of it really has any fat in it. So you could feel like you can eat so much of this stuff, but it doesn't really fill you up, like seaweed. And, it's not like the yummy seaweed like you get, like that you buy or that they wrap like maki, and it's like freaking, like bull kelp, right? It's like not tasty at all. And a lot of it's really high in iodine. So it makes you feel like you want to vomit, which my brother did too. Yeah. And so when you get out there and you try all the sort of different kinds of food that you have access to, and you realize all of them are gross, you're just kind of like,
okay, no seasoning.
Yeah. No seasoning. No seasoning.
Cooking oil.
Hunger is the best seasoning.
Olive oil.
No, zero olive oil. But let me tell you, one of the good things we had too is that we were on the ocean. Yeah. So we probably had some other seasons that were more inland in northern Saskatchewan, places like that. People were getting major dehydration issues, and that's because your body needs a little bit of salt to actually hang on to the water. So I think maybe we didn't have any dehydration issues because we were getting enough salt from the ocean, from just on our salty fish and stuff like that. But it was quite the experience.
And, so how much body weight did you guys lose by the time you were done 75 days of this crazy diet and survival?
Yeah, I was, I forget the exact number, but I was trying to gain weight going into it, which, I thought was going to be more fun than it was. But you ever tried eating a full dozen donuts? It's gross. And so I went in there. I forget what, I probably weighed like 250 and I lost 26% of my body weight.
26%?
Yeah. So, so that's how many pounds? I don't know. Rough mathematics, quite a bit.
That's 50 on 200, right?
Yeah.
So, actually 52. So that's a
do
lot.
the math. You put four quarters in a row.
Yeah, exactly.
Take away one. That's a significant chunk of your body. Well,
I'm thinking about 60 to 65 pounds.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So
did you feel the day it was finished? Mm-hmm. The first decent meal you had, how'd that taste?
Well, it tasted good. However, part of the problem was they were like, because it's not good to just, when you've kind of starved for that long, to just run out there and eat a bunch of sugar and all these things you've been craving. So, the torture kind of continues because you can't even stomach that much right away.
Right.
And B, it's also can be dangerous to drink sugars and stuff like that when you've been in that kind of state of like starvation or, ketosis, I guess they call it, when you're not getting any carbohydrates. So I think all that we could eat, all I ate was like a handful of grapes and like a piece of toast. Then they left some vegan stew for us. Like we didn't come back and just go to town. Yeah. We were still staying in this cabin, and me and my brother were like, oh man, I was having these dreams of making like pancakes with Reese's Pieces in them and eating ribs and like all this just like delicious food. And there I'm eating vegan stew and grapes. It was like very, very anticlimactic, man.
Well, I'll tell you, that's pretty amazing though. Yeah. I mean, $500,000 would ease that pain though, right?
I mean, it did. And I guess that's what you're competing for too when you're on a bass tournament. Now you don't have to starve to death. You might maybe sneak, I don't know, you're not allowed to keep them on tournaments, but you might get a couple walleye there for
but
lunch.
You're not allowed to keep other species in that pro bass tournament.
Right.
But the funny thing is I've always got food on the boat, just in case. if I get stranded somewhere while I'm pre-fishing or scouting, I'll be able to survive for a couple of days. I've got, sandwich material and snacks and stuff in the boat. But the funny thing is, the folks that are watching this podcast, if they see this bowling pin figure I have, I'm not getting ready to do a survival deal out in the wilderness, just so you know, I'm not fattening up. You see PFG on the hat, right?
Pure fishing?
No.
Performance fishing gear.
Yeah, performance fishing gear. That's Columbia's fishing line of clothing.
Yeah.
But in my case, PFG stands for pretty fat guy. Okay. And I'm not getting ready. I'm not beefing up for one of these alone shows, just so you know. Okay?
Well, it just goes to show how many fish you catch. That's all. That's like,
or how many drive-throughs I do. But anyway, the funny thing about these tournaments, though, even though you go, you just go out there and you fish. No, you don't. You stand all day. And so I'll tell you a funny story about an NHL player. And unfortunately, he passed away just 2 summers ago. Brian Marchment.
Yeah. So Marchment told me that I think that he'd fished with you before because he played in a men's league with me and my brother and cousin.
Brian did.
So we played against Brian.
After he retired.
And his dad coached. No, I think he was playing for the Leafs at the time. It was a summer league.
Oh, okay.
And so his dad coached the Brian's team.
Right.
And Brian was on it. So we had a quick chat. We were talking about fishing and your name came up. This is maybe it was after he retired. I don't remember, but it was a few years back.
Brian loved to fish, right?
Yeah.
He was a big time fisherman. He fished some local tournaments down Bay of Quinte out of Belleville area and stuff. Yeah. And then I drew him, and he was my amateur partner at a Canadian Open on Lake Erie out of Port Colborne many years ago. He was still playing at the time. And we're out there fishing, and we got into school of fish, and he's shaking, and we're calling and throwing back the smaller ones, and we got about 30 real quick. It was just boom, 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 and I said, "Are you excited?" He goes, "Oh, this is awesome! I love the adrenaline." And then he said to me while we were fishing, he was a quiet guy too, right? But you get him out there one-on-one, he'd talk a lot and stuff. And of course, he was a scout for many years, right after he retired for LA, I believe, and he traveled all over. But he said to me, I got to tell you something. He said, I've been playing professional hockey for X amount of years, and he was still playing when we fished together. And actually, my brother and him were business partners in some Tim Hortons and other things over the years and that. So I'd see him in golf with him at golf tournaments and stuff. But long story short is he said to me, playing professional hockey can be grueling. And, only a certain amount of people get up there to that level. But he says, keep in mind, we have nutritionists, trainers, people that are giving us massages. We're if we want, we can have a nap before the game. We get fed well. We go to train like when we're going to
contracts. If they get injured, they still get paid.
Right.
If they lose, they still get paid.
But the physical part of it, he said, we go to get in shape and stuff, and we also practice. But he says it's not that hard, he says, compared to tournament fishing. I looked at him, what are you talking about?
I don't get punched in the face like you do.
And he said, I'll tell you what, here's the difference. He said, in tournament fishing, he says, you guys are your own boss, your own coach, or everything. You got to do it. Unless, you have somebody like maybe your wife or whatever helping you do things. For the most part, you're doing it on your own. So you're up at 4 or 5 in the morning. You're on the water from sun up till, say, 4 in the afternoon when you weigh in. You are pre-fishing many days in advance, sun up to sundown, all day for maybe 5 days before tournament, 3 days before tournament.
Just figuring out
where the fish are.
Yeah, okay.
What they're doing on this wind, that wind, this color water, clear water, dirty water, whatever. You're trying to put patterns together for those conditions, depending on what the forecast is saying for the tournament. So you're up early, 4 in the morning usually, and usually you're working on your tackle and your boat till dark after you get off the water at, say, 5 or 6 after you weigh in, and you're getting ready for the next day, and sometimes you're fixing broken things on your boat from rough water, and you eat late meals at night, and you go to bed at like 11 or 10 or 12, and then you're up 4 hours later or 6 hours later. He said, and you're doing this day after day after day after day, and most of you don't eat. Like me, in team tournaments, if you and I were in a team tournament, I'd probably have a sandwich maybe while we're waiting to weigh in at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. but I'll have a bowl of cereal, maybe with some blueberries or something in it at 5 in the morning in the hotel before I leave, and a bunch of coffee. And I might have about this much Diet Coke during the day.
Wow.
Like half a can of Diet Coke. That's about it. But don't eat during the day. It's just go. And then you eat, you're starving by 7 at night, though. You're just starving because you haven't eaten. But that's pretty normal for us. Now, obviously, I make up when I'm not in tournaments, as you can see. But it is pretty crazy, the hardcore tournament anglers, how they don't really look after themselves, and they're standing all day, no matter if it's a 50-mile-an-hour wind or if it's 100 degrees outside and the sun's beating. You're standing all day and you're casting, and you run 70 mile an hour, 60 mile an hour to another spot, and you're casting. Then you run here, there, and all over. Then you
got to be tough. You got to be mentally tough. You know?
And even if you're pudgy like me, you still have to, bite the bullet and stay out there and compete. Because in my case, I love tournament fishing, and I'm competing against guys that are half or a third my age now.
Right.
And I'm one of the real old dudes in tournaments, and I'm going to do them till I can't move anymore. But it is physically and mentally wearing. But for me, it was always a release. So when I was doing the radio show, TV show, magazine, seminars, conservation work, and all that stuff for my whole career, I still did about 15 tournaments a year. And that's about what I do now still, about 15 events. And I'll tell you why I do them. It's a release from everything else. It's like when you go on your trips,
right?
You're not thinking about phone calls or podcasts or work or anything that might be, things to do that to get the job done.
You're in the moment.
You're in the moment, and that's it. You're not worried about anything else. For me, in tournament fishing, I'm in the moment when I'm fishing the tournament.
Awesome.
I don't think anything else except how to get those darn fish to bite and how to get the 5 biggest ones that day.
Right.
And I love it. It's competition, but it's also it's not normal fishing. It's fun for me. Because it's a release from the others. So when I did all that, and we had a lot of staff and that in the heyday, that was my real release, was to get away from that work and go fish tournaments. Now, a lot of people do it for a living nowadays.
Right.
And it was always what I wanted to do. But the only reason I started a TV show back in 83 was to just, fill that addiction and help pay for that addiction, to hopefully make a few dollars to pay for my tournament fishing addiction. And here I am, still fishing them.
Yeah, amazing. So what's it like for people that haven't fished a tournament? Let's say you're getting out there and you're catching like a 6-pound smallie or whatever. Compared to being in a tournament, what does it feel like compared to catching that fish not in a tournament?
Well, here's the funny thing about fun fishing for me, and I love to fish. I'm a fishing fanatic. Is, we go out and catch 10 fish or 20 fish, some days 30 fish. A lot of days we're disappointed with that.
Yeah.
We want to catch 40, 50, 60.
That's like the best day of most people's lives. Of
fishing.
like
this fall I was out with some friends, and we were having those days of catching, 25, 30, 40, 50 fish a day. And we'd come back and go, let's go tomorrow. I think we can do better than that. And they'd say, I think we can too. We catch bigger and more and all that. But in a tournament, the highs and lows are crazy. Like, you can go from the lowest of lows and going, why am I in this tournament? I'm out of my league. What's going on? Am I rusty? I'm not making the right decisions, blah, blah, blah. You get all these excuses and you get really down. Then all of a sudden, you have a good tournament, or you catch a giant fish in the last 5 minutes or 2 minutes of fishing, or on your last cast, you catch a giant fish and you put that 6-pounder in the live well and you take out a 3-pounder and you've gained 3 pounds in your 5-fish limit, and you go, life is good, and you run in and you win the tournament.
That's awesome.
And it doesn't get much better than that, but to tell you about the physical part of tournament fishing, in 93, 94, 95, I won the Canadian Open back-to-back 3 times in Kingston, and it was a Ranger bass boat.
Okay.
And in the middle year, I also won 95, a Ranger boat and a Chevy truck for the GM Pro Bass Classic. So I had won like 4 bass boats and a Chevy truck in that 3-year span. But during that middle year, I decided I was going to get in shape. And I lost, like 25 pounds. And started riding my road bike.
Oh, yeah.
Take it in the truck. And before I'd go practice or pre-fish, I'd go for a quick bike ride, come back, shower, have a bowl of cereal, then I'd go fish till dark.
Did you do it in the morning?
Yeah, early.
Okay, yeah.
Early.
It feels good, doesn't it?
It felt great.
Yeah.
And that year I won the Angler of the Year and the Canadian Open and the Classic. And I won it all that year, and I was mentally and physically feeling wonderful. You know, keep in mind, this is back 1995. But after that, I go, okay, what else can you do? You can't win any more in the Canadian tournaments for that, other than some one-offs, little ones here and there. And then I just got back to eating all the junk food again and not watching what I eat. That year, I just cut out desserts, about 2/3 of my desserts.
Right.
And that's in the bike riding, and that's all it took to lose a weight. And see, I love sweets.
Right.
That's not a good
I
thing.
like all food. And actually, I noticed after I came off of doing the show alone from starving for so long, like that was maybe 5 years ago now, I'm only just starting to not want to just binge eat everything I see. Like I feel like I did kind of get a bit of a like reverse eating disorder where I want to eat too much of everything just from actually kind of starving for 75 days out there. You know what I mean? And that your metabolism amps up too. Maybe it's just because I'm older now too. That could be it too.
How old were you in 2018?
So, so I'm 42 now. So going into it, 35 or something.
Was there any point during
36.
that time frame at that age were you delirious?
During the time when I was on alone?
Yeah.
I don't know if I could call myself delirious, but weak and like definitely dizzy after I'd be doing a bunch of work because we were trying to kill these things called gunnelfish, and they're not very appetizing. Okay. There's these like writhing eels that live under the rocks at low tide, so they can kind of breathe out of the water, just breathing up with the water that's kind of on their gills. So you'll go down when the tide's out and you'll like grab these big boulders and throw that one and just get ready to like try to pounce on these gunnelfish. And you'll be hoisting these huge boulders. There'll be nothing. And
They
you'll
move
just
fast too.
They move quick, and you'll honestly feel like just blacking out. You'll have to sit down and be like, oh my God, I can't go on. But you got to be ready. And then you get back up, you're dizzy. You lift over another boulder and there'll be like 8 gunnelfish. And we started like just stomping on them. So I just like stomp them and like try to stab one that was escaping. And some of them would be like a good size. And it's still fish at the end of the day, right?
Yep.
And, but yeah, during those times or at the closer to the end too, trying to solve just firewood. You know, you are gassed. Like what you could bang off in a morning before your coffee, that's taking you like hours.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your best meal in 75 days of being in the wilderness.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to say it's probably tied between the two. This one was my brother's birthday. He caught like a 4-pound, some sort of ling, almost had like blue meat to it.
How'd you catch it?
Well, he caught it just on a stick with a stick and a line with like a hook and like a shore crab.
Okay, wait.
Yeah.
For all the people that like fishing, like, people like me, you still need to buy some of that nice equipment that's out
You
there.
do?
Okay?
Oh, man.
Support those companies that sponsor us for tournament fishing.
See, trust me, that's just,
Okay,
you can still catch it on that stuff, but let me tell you, it's
So
not
this
as
fish
easy.
was pretty delicious.
It was good, but then we also got a couple of crabs, a couple
Right.
Dungeness crabs, and then what else did we have? Yeah, so we had, I think that was about it.
Nothing up in the bush?
Well, no, then there was the one time that we got a duck, and it was a teal duck, which are really fatty and juicy.
Okay,
Unfortunately,
you
not
didn't
very
have a
big.
gun, right?
No gun. So this was, it was sort of like what I use is sort of like a UFC technique from sort of the hammer fist punch.
Yeah.
And we're sitting around the fire. And we're filming on 2 cameras because the producers, they always want you rolling on stuff, right? And so me and my brother are like, switching out memory cards and batteries. They give you a bag of like $10,000, probably more, of pre-charged batteries. And we're thinking like, what a bunch of boring footage they're capturing. Well, this is why, because sometimes a crazy thing happens and you don't have time to turn the camera on when it does. I hear these wings kind of beating in the bush. I'm like, look over. I'm like, whoa, what's that over there, right? My brother's sitting there. He's like, oh, it's nothing. Okay, I thought I heard something. All of a sudden, this duck just kind of swings around the corner and walks almost right up to our fire and just pauses there. And I grabbed my hat and kind of dove out and just hammer punched the duck and just kind of grabbed it. And oh my God, it was the most tasty thing I've ever had. I remember sitting there.
Did you roast it?
We boiled everything.
Yeah, okay.
Because you don't waste any of the drippings. And let me tell you, that doesn't sound. But then you have like a duck stew. You're not wasting any of the fat. You're getting everything.
Yeah.
So we ate all this, drank all the water, and I remember just not wanting to accept that it was done. And I just remember there sitting there like sucking on the duck bones, just like trying to gnaw whatever was off, and I just had to break it. Like, it's done, Jim. It's over. And that was really good.
So that duck gift that you got.
Yes.
I wonder if it ate the wrong mushrooms. I wonder.
Maybe it got mixed up.
What are the odds of a duck? If it was, you say it was a teal?
Yeah. Green winged teal.
If it's a green winged teal, and they're a fast flying little duck.
Yeah.
You wonder what would possess it to walk up. Obviously, you were in the wilderness so far back in the boonies that it didn't think of you being a predator, maybe.
No, maybe. But I mean, it was probably migrating, because we're talking about, by this time we were well into November.
Right.
So maybe it just got tired. It couldn't fly. It was injured. It couldn't keep up with the flock. Or maybe it was just the duck god saying like, hey guys, here's a little morale booster. Keep going, baby.
That's what I like to think. Into the adventure?
Oh, geez, I don't remember.
Midway?
But I'd say it was probably past midway, probably day 50 or something. But actually, I was up another canoe trip my brother and I did, which I was on the Seal in South Seal in northern Manitoba. We had really high water on the South Seal, but we were still able to just slam some like real nice walleye. I caught my personal best.
Nice.
Then I caught my personal best.
Oh yeah,
like 5 minutes later. Yeah.
And how nice ones?
Yeah, I literally had but I don't. Geez, I didn't weigh them, but they weren't. No, these two. Well, we already had enough to eat already.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, I was just using a little Williams Ridgeback spoon and jigging with like 20-pound test fluoro that I had to catch big Lakers on big sand.
Right.
Which we didn't get because it was like huge waves and like 35 degrees. It was so hot. It was terrible conditions. But yeah, just one, and then the other, to both my personal best. I don't know how big they were. Probably like 10 pounds or something like that, around there. You know what I mean?
That's pretty good.
Yeah, pretty good size. And I had to edit around the footage because I looked so giddy. It was embarrassing. So I had to like edit that I wasn't such a dweeb, just geeking out over how excited I was about catching these two big fish back to back. It was awesome though. But when I finished up near Churchill, there's a local guy up there. There's we saw about 10 polar bear up there, and we ended up talking to a local guy, and he said he had the same thing, that these ducks walked up, or he said geese walked up to his campfire. So maybe at a certain time of year they get disoriented, they see a light, it's dark out. Mm-hmm. So that's the only other time a guy up in northern Canada telling me he's seen that before. So, Yeah,
it's fun. It's funny, all the years of shooting the TV series. I was lucky enough to have camera people, like sometimes one cameraman, sometimes two camera folks, shooting and that to capture everything. And a lot of times they'd be just rolling continuously. Other times they'd wait if there's a big lull. They just wouldn't hit on until we'd get a fish, then they'd keep rolling.
Yeah.
And that, but in your case, and I think a lot of the people watching this podcast would have the same question. And this might be maybe for some of the haters out there too.
Right. Yeah.
When you're doing a lot of your videos, you're the camera person.
Right.
Yeah. You're setting up a GoPro or whatever camera to capture you coming down those rapids. Or I saw the show with your brother and that where, either he'd be shooting you or you'd be shooting him, or you'd have camera set up where you're doing your campsite or you're going through the rapids. That's a lot of work, man.
It is.
I mean, I had shooters for all my 900 and some odd episodes. I had people shooting. Our big stress would be getting the right footage, just like you guys, getting the right footage when you're out there so that it looks like something when you're putting it out there, in the YouTube universe.
Yeah.
But the other thing would be we'd always worried about getting big fish and lots of fish to make that episode interesting with a lot of how-to and adventure and stuff. And in your case, though, you're capturing everything from eating to camping to canoeing to portaging and all those things. Mm-hmm. But you're also shooting it yourself. Now, there's nobody standing in the bushes and you don't have 3 or 5 crew.
Well, I get that. Like, why would you lie and say that you were just the two of you? Or why would you lie and say that was a solo trip? I'll get comments like this on YouTube because, and to me, in a way, that's like a compliment because it says I did that good of a job at filming it to the point where somebody thinks somebody else is there. But at the same time, they also don't understand that like the video editing side that goes into it. So let's say I'll come up to a rapid, I'll scout the rapid, I'll set up a camera on a tripod. Then I'll run 2 GoPros on me and I'll run the rapid and I'll edit the shot of me in the camera. Then I'll pull over, walk back up to get the camera, but I don't show myself coming back for the camera, or I'll put a drone up in the air and I'll put the canoe on my shoulders and walk a bit. Then I'll put the canoe down, I'll land the drone and I'll edit it all in. So you do have to suspend a little bit of disbelief because some people are like, well, who was flying the drone if you were portaging your canoe, right? But so, yeah, so I, then somebody's like, well, that's fake then if you really have to go back and get your camera, right?
I don't know how that would be.
I'm like, well, I guess.
Yeah. See, we called our show The Real Fishing Show for a reason. Because we knew that we didn't want to fake stuff. We wanted to show it as it happens. All those fish, good, bad, or ugly, if we lost them or caught them, we like showing that stuff. But the fact that you guys are doing all your own production, it's like you're doing the job of being the survivor, the adventurous, the camping, the canoeing, the running the routes. You're doing all of these different talents, plus you got to know the technical things of working cameras.
Right, yeah.
And make sure, and I'm sure after you would run some pretty cool rapids, you go, I just hope the one on the tripod got that wide shot.
Yeah. And you know what? The other challenge is out there too is keeping your batteries all charged. Like me and my brother did a 25-day expedition where we went up the Barrington River. We portaged over a height of land in the South Seal, went down the Seal. Amazing, amazing river. All these cool things happen. But if you can't keep your batteries charged, how are you going to capture it anymore? And, you're going to get home and say, sorry, honey, I just turned into just a fun fishing vacation with my brother. We didn't capture any of it. I have to monetize all this stuff. You know what I mean?
I don't know if I've even told this story, Jim, about the early years of filming the show. In the 80s, when we were starting out, we went down to Bay of Quinte.
Yeah.
We had one of those days. Fishing was on fire. We shot 2 full shows that day.
Nice.
We had pike up to 19 3/4 pounds.
Nice.
Walleyes up to over 10 pounds.
Yeah.
Smallmouth up to like 3.5 pounds, and largemouth up to over 4 pounds. Multi-species, multi-techniques, and we caught a ton of fish this day.
Yeah.
We went back to the hotel, ordered all this Italian food takeout, and that we're celebrating,
Yeah.
Cameraman, this was one cameraman at the time, and he was shooting 3/4 video back before the 1/2 or any of this digital stuff was available. We were shooting 3/4 video tape, broadcast quality. He comes back, and the deck was big, and then the camera was big, and they were run by this cable that had a ton of wires in it with a multi-pin connection. We're getting the food's coming in. He'd been in his room checking footage. He came back and he looked like somebody had died. And we said, what's up? What's wrong?
No.
I think his name was Mark at the time. I think it was. I'm trying to think which shooter. He said, and we'd always had audio problems, so we were working with all these different types of microphones.
Right.
We used to run microphone cables from the deck up our pant leg into our lav mic here, but it wasn't wireless then because they had just started coming out in the early 80s.
So you're on a leash that if you move, you're going to tear the sucker out.
Yeah, so we were running at that time. I don't know if we had just switched to wireless or not, but the audio was perfect because we had invested in new mics. I think we just switched to some new mics.
Nice.
Audio was perfect. He had no picture.
Oh,
nothing.
That's
whatever
devastating,
multi-pin had the video in or out deal wasn't secure in this big pin with all these little, big plug with all these little.
It happens. Sometimes the shooter will double tap. They'll think they press record, but they'll hit it twice.
The opposite.
At least you have other people to blame. Yep. I have no one to blame by myself. But you know what the hardest thing is the fishing.
We didn't blame him because we knew how bad he felt. And we're not those type of people to make somebody feel worse. But it was a lackluster celebration supper that night, knowing we had 0 footage that day. And we had two of the best shows up until that time frame we'd ever shot with big fish, and you'd see us cast using a crankbait, and all of a sudden, bam, and we reel in like, you know, a 10-pound walleye and a 4-pound largemouth.
Maybe you could have just put an audio podcast up, eh?
Yeah,
that's all you had.
podcasts weren't big back in the early 80s.
There's no such thing. Maybe, I'm guessing you didn't order the surf and turf for everyone.
You know, fishing shows don't sound right if you did just audio.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of references there that don't sound like you're fishing.
Right.
And I'm not going to get into them for this because I'm still a family type guy. You know, I'm grandfather now and stuff. But, you know,
read between the lines.
A lot of those things that are said when you're fishing don't sound appropriate if you only heard that and you didn't know the people were actually catching fish.
Right.
And so let's not talk about that. But I will say that we did have big fish that day. And that's one of those stories that, and one of those, two of those episodes that never got aired, but we did get those other ones too.
Yeah, yeah.
Did you ever have you ever had a trip that was a bust?
I've had a couple things where I just accidentally deleted cards, or where I lost the footage, or I lost a card. I had one where I did this solo trip up to James Bay, and somehow I lost a card. So now I have to edit everything. It was like a GoPro card. I think it was the one on my helmet, on my whitewater helmet. So so now I had, which I get creative out there. So I'm using my helmet as like a tripod. I put it on the rock and line the boat down some rapids, and I'll pick it up. And that footage was gone. So now I have to edit everything just from one camera angle. It's just like, oh man.
And it would have been epic with the other
it would have been
shot, right?
I had all this cool slow-mo footage, and it's just like, or the time my son Hudson threw a camera into the water, and I'm trying to, like, I bring my kids on a lot of these trips, and a lot of them are getting to be pretty longer. So I managed to kind of justify doing these month-long family trips by filming them. Right. And so, but they're not a big hit. Like people are starting to like them a bit more, but I lose money off of them, but it's still worth it. Right. And so I invest in this like brand new state-of-the-art GoPro, and I got all this footage on it, and my 2-year-old thinks, well, that thing looks pretty cool. Picks it up, it's on a little clamp. I don't know how he got it undone. And he's up in the bow with my wife, pops it off and throws it in. All I kind of see is this, and I hear bloop. I'm like, honey, what was that? And she's just like in shock, doesn't answer. It was the GoPro. Anyways, there's a few minutes where our eyes were probably twitching after that, but then eventually you just got to laugh about it.
I met Hudson today, and you know, as soon as I walked in for the podcast, he's 2.5. He gives me a big hug, and I go, okay, that's pretty cool. So I don't think he did it on purpose. In the short time I known him today and playing with what were those Paw Patrols?
The Paw Patrol toys.
We played with those
deal.
Pre-podcast. We did a little bit of fun stuff with Hudson. That'll be one you'll have to talk to him about when he's older.
Yeah, I think so. It's lying at the bottom of the French River. If anybody's got any scuba gear, you might come across it. I think it costs about $800 or something.
Well, we lost one of those cameras, except a bigger version about 25, 30 years ago. Big Amphibico underwater housing, very expensive, with an expensive camera in. And my cameraman accidentally was getting a cutaway right at water level, and he dropped it into the muddy Ottawa River up near Montebello.
Oh man, those amphibious housings for like, those are not
several
cheap.
$1,000s. It was like over 10, I think. My cameraman, actually, this was a different one, not the one that had the video in problem, but a different one. Once again, he looked like somebody had passed away. He said, Bob, you'll never guess what happened. They idled over to us while we were muskie fishing. And I said, what's up? And he said, I just lost the camera. But Rick McCrory, who is now a very good friend, I didn't know him at the time, but he ran the camera boat, and he was a friend of the guide I was fishing with.
Right.
He hit a GPS point. This is just when the GPSs had come out, just when they started getting popular, and he had the latest, greatest one on his boat. So he punched a waypoint where it went in the muddy water. He didn't tell me in that, because we didn't have a lot of time to talk, because he was always, 20, 30, 40 yards away in the camera boat during those 2 days we were down there muskie fishing. But about a week later, he calls me at the office and he said, Bob, and he owned a non-destructive company, a non-destructive testing company. So he did work for Bell and Bombardier, Pratt & Whitney, and all these companies for parts and tested them, structural parts and that in Montreal. And he had a lot of staff. So he brought one of his employees that was a diver all the way to Montebello from Montreal, put the boat in, diver found the camera.
Nice.
Like a week later.
Nice. So I guess it wasn't too deep.
I think it was in like probably 15 or 20 feet of water. And he found it. And I thought the current might have taken it or the silt, whatever. And the irony is the footage, the tape had run out to the end. So we played all the tape and it was on its side. And there's carp swimming by and all kinds of panfish and stuff swimming by during that time frame where it just kept running until the tape ran out. I forget how long the tape was, but that was cool how he couriered it back to me. And then I said, "Oh, Rick, why don't you come fishing with me? I'm coming down your way." And I was going to Lake Champlain. And long story short, he spent 7 days with me in the boat as I was pre-fishing for a tournament, a big tournament, and we became really good friends. And then he ended up buying like $1 million cottage on Lake Champlain years later because he liked it so much after after years went by. So funny how things happen, but that's how Rick became a friend of mine. Was he got my camera back? And
good reason to make guy, that's really nice. Especially driving.
I didn't have my 2-year-old son throw it overboard.
Well, you had more on the line, I suppose, than me because you had a whole show and sponsors directly having to do it, which is more, I guess, probably more pressure than doing YouTube.
Well,
and you didn't have a background in filming, really, right? Like this is all stuff you had to learn. Same with me.
Yeah, and the cameramen we would hire weren't from fishing shows because there was no other Canadian fishing shows back when we started. Red Fisher was an American guy who lived in Canada from Ohio who did a show for about 6 or 7 years. But he had long since retired from that TV show, and it was all shot on film with no audio.
Right.
And then he'd sit at Scuttlebutt Lodge, similar to where we are, and talk about his adventure with, Ted Williams or Fergie Jenkins or whoever he was fishing with. And they would show this black and white footage, or I might have been colored near the end. And then when we started, though, there was we're hiring cameramen from rock videos or industrial videos or weddings or whatever, and they'd be our shooters and that. And then eventually we had full-time people. But the hard part for me was when I was shooting those episodes, not hard, but sometimes, the fish weren't cooperating. And people would always say, "Oh, yeah, it took you this long or that long." Some shows took us 45 minutes to get the half-hour show shot.
Wow.
Less than an hour. And that's just because the fish were biting. We'd done our homework and we had a good area. And boom, 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 just like when you're catching those char and lake trout.
We kind of lucked onto that too with them essentially being trapped in the headwater after the run and there being a hatch.
Yes, and so the fish are on. You're in the right place at the right time. And that happened to us a lot over the years. There were other times, like in Belize, we were there for 5 days. And my niece, Mariko, was shooting her show for the World Fishing Network. And she's got her crew, and she goes out bonefish fishing. We go tarpon fishing.
Yeah.
She gets 10-pound bonefish and enough fishing footage, other than some stuff on shore and that. She got her show done day one.
Yeah.
We lost 3 or 4 200-pound tarpon, 150, 200-pound tarpon, jumped off, broke off, whatever.
Yeah.
Next day we go for this. Next day we go for that. We get a big kingfish on it. Spools us completely, trolling. We lose it. Anyway, long story short, it took us all 5 days. By the time the end of the show, I'm wearing different hats, different clothes every day because it's different days.
Yeah.
And so here we are, day 2. We'd come back from a commercial break and we'd go into a tip. And then, okay, here it is, day 3 now. We're out there. It took us 5 days to get enough footage for that show, which was unusual, but it happened. But most shows took us a day. We'd get our shows shot, or in hours or a full day. But those exceptions like that, or Russia, we put it all together for one episode. just after the wall went down.
Yeah,
And
that's pretty. You've been some interesting places for the show. Here, Russia, there was some interesting components to that trip.
well, yeah, I remember Outdoor Canada magazine came on that shoot. Jerry Kobalenko, and he was a writer, photographer, full time with the magazine.
He's another Arctic explorer guy too.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and he wasn't back then, but he is now. I actually Googled him about a year ago, and wondering where he ended up.
He's done all these crazy things up on Ellesmere Island.
You never run into him, have you?
I've talked to him a few times. Yeah, just over email.
Great guy.
Yeah.
So he was on the shoot. We're up in this big Russian helicopter, and he's jumping all over in this big chopper, getting photos out the window. And at one point, he knocked one of the fuel hoses off, and we could smell all this jet fuel. And it didn't affect the running of the helicopter, but when we got to where we were going and we got to the hotel that night, we were like 5 time zones past Moscow in middle Siberia. And all our baggage got soaked with jet fuel. And I remember the extra bags we left in a storage room in this little hotel we were staying at, and the whole hotel smelled like jet fuel, and including our room.
That doesn't make you feel so good.
You don't want to be lighting up a cigarette or anything.
That's for sure.
And anyway, we ended up had an adventure like you wouldn't believe. Like some of the meals on that trip were like for lunch we'd have a green tomato. And that would be it. And one time we stopped at a guy selling a fish on the side of the road, and it was a pike that looked like it hadn't been ever refrigerated ever. And my brother took over a case of OV beer with him, cans of OV beer, all the way to Russia, because back then we were sponsored by OV in the late 80s, early 90s. And this guide who looked like Rambo, who was, in the Army, was with us. Wasn't much of a fishing guide, more of a hunting guide, but he was with us. And that night, we're doing something, and we were camping, and we were sleeping on this old school bus and in tents. And he got into the beer and drank the whole case himself.
Your brother?
No.
Oh, the Army guy.
Yeah, the guy looked like Rambo. I mean, he had a big knife here and that, and he was a big, tall, rough-looking dude. Wasn't real friendly, but anyway, he got drunker than a skunk that night. And he had vodka too. And my 2 shooters on that trip, my camera guys were with him at the campfire. And he threw that pike into the coals there. And Pierre from Montreal thought, he's just throwing it out because it's probably rotten, It was looking awful when we picked it up on that roadside deal. The bus driver grabbed it. And then he gets a stick and he's poking it. Then he pokes it and he starts eating it like corn on a cob. And then he offered it to those guys. And they didn't really want to, but he was giving them vodka and stuff, so they had a bite of pike each. They didn't get sick or anything, so I guess cooking took away something out of it.
I've had the only thing I've ever gotten from eating fish that was probably questionable was just the runs.
Yeah.
I've never gotten proper sick off of it, but definitely have like...
You know what I call that when we're on the road?
What?
Bob Azuma's revenge. Anyway, it's Izumi, not Azuma. Anyway, but you know what? That comes with the territory, even with what I did over the years, is getting, a little touch of food poisoning here and there. I remember getting it at a Chinese restaurant up in northern Alberta at a walleye tournament that we were filming up there. And that was just a week before we went to Russia.
Yeah.
And I go to Russia, and I've been off for like over a week with my stomach turn. Then we go to Russia where there's hardly much food. Now, the best meal we had in Russia was in a Siberian village.
Cool.
And they were all dressed up in their traditional garb, and they were really happy. And I guess there was 16 of us that were traveling together, and I guess I was supposed to be the leader of this pack, which unbeknownst to me was when we were in this tent to eat this lamb they had sacrificed and boiled for us. And they gave me the skull, and I had to have the first bite before everybody could, start. And I didn't know what they were talking about in Russia and that. And then the interpreter said, "Bob, you have to have the first bite." And I was still off from that trip.
So you were just coming over food poisoning, and now you're eating like a sheep's brain, essentially.
Yeah.
It's
and so
a little bit.
Wayne, my brother Wayne, who's 9 years old, is beside me. Wayne likes, what Wayne's favorite drink is? whatever you're pouring.
Okay.
He's very versatile.
Nice kind of guy.
Yeah, he loves to drink everything. Scotch, wine, beer, it doesn't matter.
Free is his favorite.
Yeah, he likes to drink if you're offered. He's there. So, and I'm not a big drinker. So anyway, they pour us this vodka in a bowl that we're going to have the water from the lamb.
Yeah.
And so we got like tons of vodka and that, and everybody's drinking vodka, and my crew, and everybody's getting a good buzz going. And Wayne's beside me, he's drinking the vodka. And so what he does is he elbows. He said, "I'll grab it." So he grabbed that big sheep head.
Yeah.
And just takes a big bite out of its neck.
Nice.
And everybody hooped and hollered in there, all the Siberians, and bang, we were ready to start eating. Yeah. And at one point, Pierre is over 2 tables away, and we had these big wooden bowls full of the meat and stuff. And he does this, and he lifts up this intestine. To show me, because they just boiled the whole thing, right? Yeah. I don't think the fur, but everything else, or the wool or whatever. But and he dropped it in, and I was laughing because he was trying to get my attention. Yeah, pretending he was getting a piece of meat, and he pulled this thing up about 2 feet long.
That's cool. Yeah, were they like a reindeer herding culture, like a Siberian, like
like we were just north of Mongolia.
Oh, okay.
Near Lake Baikal. And that's the largest freshwater lake in the world.
Yeah, it has as much, I think Superior's bigger by surface area.
Yeah.
But it has as much water, about the same amount of water as all the Great Lakes in one, because it's like 5,000 feet deep, which just blows my mind.
And we didn't have a boat.
Yeah.
And we're in a helicopter. And Jerry from Outdoor Canada, 2 shooters, Wayne and I we'd separated from the other group. And this helicopter, and it's all black from the dirty fuel, probably not really good fuel they're burning on the side. It looked like it'd been in a barbecue. Flying up there on this gigantic lake, as you said how big it is.
Yeah.
We don't have a boat. We got waders. They said, "Where do you guys want to fish?" We're up there looking. I don't know. It's kind of like looking at an ocean with all the boats and where you're going to start. So we just saw a creek coming in. We said, "Well, how about right there?" And they'd hovered the helicopter because they didn't want to land in the marshy stuff. And we all jumped out just like, it was an army movie or
that's fun.
Or Air Force thing. We jumped out and we caught these giant fish that were like perch, but very big.
Oh, cool.
Gosh, the name escapes
me.
I
mean, I've heard them call their version of walleye Xander before.
Oh, we caught Xander in Spain in a bass tournament.
Okay.
But these were just like a perch, and the bars were slightly different, but same.
I've seen pictures. They just look like jumbo perch.
We ended up catching some at the mouth of this river. Yeah. But our main species was taimen, which is like a muskie and a salmon in one. It's got teeth, but it's like a salmon-looking fish. But it's ferocious like a muskie, and it eats rodents and stuff.
Cool. Different than anything we get around here.
And we were looking for taimen on Baikal, and we actually saw one from the helicopter. It spooked, and it was going down a creek, and they grow big. Some of these things grow like 4 feet long and stuff, very large. We didn't get a chance to catch any, but that was why we went to Russia, was to catch taimen, but we never did see any.
So you got no taimen, and you ate a bunch of
we got Harius
things
and we got Lennox. Those 2 species we did catch while we were in Russia, and I can't remember what the perch were called. If that one of them almost looked like an Arctic grayling, the fish we caught. We caught some of those, but it wasn't like it was a lot of fish. It wasn't like going out to Lake St. Clair and catching 40, 50 fish going, "Oh, this is a mediocre day." It was a struggle that trip, but it was an adventure.
That sounds really cool.
10 days.
That sounds
really
cool.
We were on Aeroflot jets. So we're on this big jumbo jet. We're flying to another time zone, going across out of Moscow towards
massive country, of course.
Yeah, and
bigger than Canada.
Oh, it's crazy. And when we were by bus, we didn't see any convenience stores, gas stations, nothing for miles and miles. Except all of a sudden you'd come by a field of MiG jets, But we're on this flight, and one of our guides from Russia. He was in the restroom, but they took off anyway. And after we got up, he came out disoriented out of the restroom and sat back in his seat. And I was laughing, going, "I guess that doesn't happen in Canada too often. I've never seen it." And then another takeoff, a lady was talking like this to somebody behind her, and her tray was down, and her little infant that was all wrapped up rolled off and rolled down about 3 down the aisle as we're taking down the driveway. Baby didn't get hurt, but it's just funny how they don't make you do that, fold the tables up.
They don't say anything. They just go.
And you couldn't find seatbelts, and most of the seats, they'd been cut off. People just taking them.
Yeah.
So most of the seats didn't have seatbelts. It was an interesting deal. That whole trip had lots of adventure and lots of surprises. But, and I'm sad for what's happening over there now. I don't agree with what's going on, with Ukraine, and very sad. But we were there when, everybody was starting to feel a bit of freedom with that wall going down, but still lineups in Moscow for a loaf of bread. And I remember this huge lineup that was, like over 100 people. And I went to the front store to look, and there was only about 6 loaves of bread. So I don't know what they were waiting for.
Wow. So they're potentially waiting for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wanted when I was there, I wanted a Diet Coke really bad, right?
Yeah.
I see an old Coke machine on the other side of the street. So I run over there thinking, maybe I can get a Diet Coke. That'd be a treat. I don't know. That aspartame's not good for you. I know that. People tell me, but I like Diet Coke. So I go over, and there's a glass, like a glass that's all syrupy and fingerprints, and it's a communal glass. And it's in this old metal Coke machine. And if you had the right rubles or whatever, you put it in, and out would come the water and syrup, and you'd fill up, you would drink it, and you'd put this glass back for the next person.
I never heard of that before.
I didn't have one because they didn't have Diet Coke, or Coca-Cola Light. But anyway,
probably wouldn't pass COVID scrutiny.
No,
nowadays.
I don't think so. No, you'd have to drink it with your mask on. Or a long straw. But no, it was an adventure, and
wild.
The funny thing is our lives have been pretty parallel, with adventure, except so different.
Right, right.
You're wondering where the next meal's coming from, or the next rapid that might be life-threatening, or whatever it might be, a polar bear, whatever, right? Me, I'm just wondering about, how to beat these young guys in tournaments, or, the show gave us lots of adventure.
There's a lot of similarity, I think, because I love fishing too, but it's kind of like a part of what I'm already doing, right? But it has a lot to do with going to the places I choose to go. But then there's the travel aspect. There's the being on the water aspect. There's the nature aspect, just, the beautiful sunrise on a calm day when you're on a big body of water. Like, I'm sure as a fisherman that must speak to you to some extent too, right?
I feel different when I'm in the outdoors. And I've spent a lot of time on the water in my career I think I'm in my 44th year now fishing full time for a living, and started when I was like 21 type of thing. And there's something about when you're out there, out on the water, for me, is like, doesn't matter how things are going, whether they're good, bad, or ugly, everything's good when you're out there. It feels great, and what I do is not for everybody, like the tournament fishing aspect, and what you do isn't for everybody, because a lot of people would look at some of your videos, Jim, and they would say, I'd like to do that. And you provide a dream for a lot of people. Like me, when I watched your videos recently before we met, I watched some that I just wanted to see where you've been in that. And I go, that's not for me, some of that stuff. I like, the conveniences. Pillow top mattresses are kind of nice when I'm sleeping, and some fine dining kind of goes well. But, I also like being in the outdoors, so I get it. Yeah. But the funny thing is maybe 30 years ago, I would attempt to do some of it, because there's something about being out there where nobody else is. Yeah. And saying, this is like my own real estate right now. I own this lake and this camp area, and maybe 100 miles of bush or more around me, right?
Absolutely. No, there's definitely a cool feeling about being in an area where there's nobody else anywhere close by. You just, the fishing, the wildlife, everything's in its natural state. And, you really feel free. It gives you that sense of freedom, I think, is one of the things I like about it. And you're seeing things that, a lot of people haven't seen, or that maybe nobody has seen for hundreds, thousands of years in some of the remote places. The only signs of humans, for example, I saw up in the Arctic is 400-year-old tent rings from old Inuit campsites. sites, you know, and stuff like that. We found a lot of interesting stuff like that. We found a stone cairn one time that was left probably by 1850s explorers,
Right.
and reported to the Canadian Museum of History, who'd been looking for this type of thing in the search for Franklin in the area, but somehow missed it. And I think just because we're traveling by canoe, or we're traveling in the way that, you know, people did at one time, those explorers probably built it when they were walking on the frozen ocean along the bank, and it seemed to be a good place to stop.
Cool.
That's where they stopped, and that's where they built it, right? And that's where we stopped too here, you know, 100 and 200, you know, whatever, or more years later, right? So,
yeah, you're taking the trail less traveled, obviously, and you know, a lot of the folks that are looking for some of that history might be flying in there by helicopter and landing or whatever, right?
Right.
They're not doing
they're not as fully immersed. Like their chances on, like, you know, being eaten by a polar bear are probably a little bit less.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Which I've had. But what was it like? You had to get into this, and when you're young, and I feel like it's a passion. It's got to be a passion. And the same for me is that, you know, I started when I was a kid. Is there anything that really was the catalyst that got you into fishing and then made you say, like, this is something that I really have to do as my life, as my career?
I think, just to back up a little bit, is I don't think you should take anything for granted,
right,
you know, in life about, you know, just everything, you know. My dad used to drill it in us: be humble, don't take things for granted, don't owe anybody anything. A lot of things that kind of didn't click until I was older.
Yeah.
But I remember him now like it was clear as day. But he died when I was 21. So he raised 4 of us as a single parent, right? So I'm the youngest. I was a year and a half old. 2 sisters in between. My brother Wayne's the oldest at 9 years older. So there's 4 of us, 2 girls, 2 boys. He raised a single parent. Never spoke badly about our mother ever. She left when I was a year and a half old.
Oh, that's got to be
Wayne would have been 10 and a half.
Yeah.
So she left us.
Yeah.
Rural Ontario, southwestern Ontario, outside of Blenheim.
Yeah.
They'd moved from Toronto, where Wayne and Lynn were born. Georgie and myself were born in Chatham, and they moved down there because Dad wanted a quieter lifestyle than the as he called it, the rat race, the city. You know, so he moved out of Toronto down into farm country. I was born down there, and at a year and a half, she decided she wanted to go back to Toronto. And Dad, who was the head chef at St. Joseph's Hospital, he was cooking there with all the nuns at St. Joe's Hospital. He said, I like it. I like the community. I like the people, the lifestyle. I want to stay here. And if you want to move to Toronto, but I'm keeping the kids and that. And that was it. There was nothing bad. He never said nothing bad about her till never. His whole life till he died. I never heard a negative thing. He just never, ever, threw her under the bus, because you know what? He obviously thought that was the right thing to do. And I can't imagine, not being bitter or something that your mother of 4 kids and wife is leaving.
Yeah.
But
I can't imagine not having my wife to help with the kids.
I know. I mean, now that I see how much work my wife has done our whole time together for pushing 40 years, not quite, but pushing 40 years, I can't imagine it either. And so I cannot believe the amount of work he did. So he worked and took us to work in his free time, picking strawberries, cherries, detasseling corn, tobacco, hay, straw. We did all this farm work as kids.
Ah, cool.
And when he wasn't working, he worked with us, and that's how we survived. So I've always worked.
So you were working, literally doing a wage job since a very young age.
Yeah,
picking
like when
strawberries.
I was in public school.
Sounds like one of my dad's stories.
Tomatoes, all that stuff. That's what we did. I mean, it was how we survived, because he had a single salary. But see, he was like the Pied Piper down there in Blenheim. He would take us and all the neighborhood kids fishing and buy us ice cream cones and hot dogs and hamburgers and chocolate bars and chips and stuff. He'd take us and all the neighborhood kids fishing all the time. And he coached youth bowling. He coached the girls' softball team in Blenheim. And he was very competitive. He was also a competitive bowler in Toronto before I was born. 5-pin. He had cases and cases of trophies when I was a little kid. And I remember him one day with a butter knife taking off his name on them, and he was taking them to the bowling alley, like boxes and boxes. I said, "What are you doing with those, Dad?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm going to give them away to the kids there that bowl in the league."
Yeah.
He didn't care. They were just to
Yeah.
him trophies that didn't mean anything because that was a different era of his life, and that was the way he is. But when he died, he had nothing. I mean, everything he spent that he made, he spent on us and the kids.
Wow. Yeah.
Took us to the kids' fishing derby down in at the mouth of Rondo Bay in Erio, the Rondo Rod and Gun Fishing Derby, kids' derby. And we'd win that. Like I'd win the youngest boys, and then Wayne, my brother, would win the oldest boys until he was 16 and he couldn't enter anymore. And my sister Lynn would win, and the McTavishes would win. And there were neighbors, a farm family down the road that really were good to us, and their mother would look after us when I was real little and that while Dad was working and that. So they were very tight with us, and all these kids would win prizes that Dad would take in his little Volkswagen Beetle. 9 of us would get in it, right?
So just like the commercial.
Yeah, is there a commercial like
Well, it was the famous commercial. How many people can you fit in a Beetle? And the Beetle would pull up and like 12 people would climb out.
Well, 9 of us. I was one of the guys in the back where you had to sit above the engine back there. And I think there was 3 of us in that little compartment where, you could fit maybe 2 little suitcases in or whatever. So then in the 70s, he started the first bass tournament in Canada. First competitive organized bass tournament in Canada, in Rondo Bay. And that got me hooked. And I remember I was like 16 or 17 years old, the first one he ran, and started to hail that day. And it was a draw for partner. And I drew this guy from Windsor in a 14-foot aluminum boat. And the hail was so big, we pulled up in the canal in Rondo Park and hid under a picnic table for a bit while the hail went through. And that got me hooked on tournament fishing, even as a teenager.
Did the hail make it more interesting to you, or just
no,
made
it
it
sucked
memorable?
because we weren't fishing for maybe 20 minutes, half an hour.
Right.
And I wanted to keep casting, and so did the guy with me. And so we ended up, he ran that for about 3 or 4 years before he passed away, maybe 5 years before he passed away. And then I ran a memorial a number of years after that. But I'd won that a few times in the 70s, one with my brother and then one with George McTavish, the neighbor that I grew up with. And his mom was the one that used to look after us. So we won it. And then in 77 and then 79, I won it with Wayne. So the cool thing is I've won bass tournaments in 6 different decades now.
Okay, yeah.
60 or 80 bass tournaments in 6 different decades, all, right through. And so I got to live into the 2030s to get into 7 decades to win some then, because I've won some in the 2020s and 2010s.
That's going to be like a Gordie Howe-esque kind of record. You know what I mean? To win something in that many decades.
There's nothing higher in fishing, at least for me, than to win a tournament. And I've won some with my son, which were very special with Darren. We've won some in Cornwall and Belleville and some areas together. And that was really cool. And yeah, it's the highest of highs, yet tournaments can be the lowest of lows. If you have a bad turn, driving home seems like eternity, but it is what it is. It's why I like it. It's like a roller coaster ride. Just like on your adventures, you have some lows, obviously, where you're soaking wet and you're cold and you're hungry. And the next thing you know, the sun's shining, you're out there on the water and you're going to town and you're going, hey, this is pretty darn good, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not all a tough slog and fishing in hail and going home with your tail between the legs, right? But, if it wasn't, you never know what's going to happen. And if it wasn't for a little bit of that, the adventure wouldn't be there, right? You wouldn't have the highs when you win compared to the lows when you don't win, right?
Well, a buddy of mine down in Oklahoma, he just passed away. I was down at his funeral in December. He always said, don't be a victim, Bob. And he'd say this for decades and stuff. And I think that's a good message, though, because, Dave was very successful in everything he did. And he built up this giant MTM recognition, largest awards and recognition business in the world. Oh, wow. Doing like the Heisman trophies and all kinds of neat things and Super Bowl rings and that. But he was also a competitive tournament angler. And you know what? He said, just go hard. He was a competitive guy, just like my dad was, very competitive. And the thing is in life, it's whatever you want to make of it. It's like what you do, you push the boundaries very much so to do things like you do, both physically and from a nutrition standpoint, and that you're, at times living off the land. That's not for everybody. But it's very appealing to people that watch what you do in your YouTube videos that get millions of views. For guys like me that say, oh, I wish I could do that. But do I really? No, I'd rather watch you do it and suffer and see you slice your hand open. Not that I like that, but it's like it's almost like people are watching to see what goes wrong in some cases. Not that they wish it upon you. Maybe they do. I don't know. But it's like...
I like to think most don't.
No, most don't. But when it does... Everybody has had hiccups in their life, except you're just showing yours to the world when it gets on YouTube.
That's right. I had somebody say, "Hey, Jim, it'd be cool to see a bloopers video," and I'm thinking, I think I don't. All my bloopers are on the thing. I get, you got to be able to show some sort of, it's like even if you're in your show, you got to show sometimes that you might not catch a fish for a morning, or it probably never happened to you, but
Oh yeah, we had shows we didn't catch fish, but you know what? Yeah. Those are the shows you never saw because they'd be friggin' boring. Most viewers would have turned their TV off if 10 minutes in the show they don't show a darn fish and that. So we did have a few of those trips, more times than not when I say that, there would be times where we'd go out I remember 20 some odd times we went straight where we'd had no failures whatsoever.
Nice.
And we got what we wanted. And then the next spring, I remember going out all gunned up and going, I remember last spring was so successful. We started filming and we had a lot of things, wind and rain and fish not biting and water too clear, too muddy. I mean, it was 101 real fishing excuses. It would have been my new buck. But you know what? Those things happen. And so, you can't rest on your laurels. Just like you with your adventures. Right. Every time you have an incredible one, I know what's going through your mind, and I don't even know you that well. You're already thinking of another one.
Oh, for sure.
Always.
For sure, yeah. What's going to be next? And they change sometimes from year to year. I'll do this next year. Oh, maybe, you know what? I should do that the year after. But yeah, there's always these things and these places that I look at on the map that I want to venture here. I already have a big trip planned for me and my son when he turns 15. So, hopefully,
good.
So he doesn't know about this yet, but we're going to be essentially paddling across Great Bear and continuing to the Arctic coast. So his training has already begun.
Well, after meeting Hudson this morning, I think that he's already training for it, with his little paw patrols.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, I bet you, if he knew now what you had him he'd be excited, But that's pretty cool, and I think that's one thing about adventure, whatever it is, whatever people that are watching think of as adventure, whether it's a cycling trip or camping or fishing or doing what you're doing on extreme things, you can do it at any level that you want.
Right.
And that's what I love about the sport of fishing. Yeah. You can try to find places that the fish have never seen a lure like you've been doing, I've been to before. Or you can go to the lakes to get a lot of pressure and try to figure out how to catch those fish that have seen every lure in a Bass Pro Shops, And that's what I like about what I do is you can take it competitively or you can take it very low fun and keep it cheap and fish off the bank with a handful of tackle and a rod and reel.
I took Hudson down. We got on the quad and went to this public boat launch at the end of the dock there. He caught a little rock bass. He didn't really understand. He was, I had to reel it in, and I said, we're going to let it go. And he wanted to keep it. He wanted to eat it. So, okay, so we brought it back, and I showed him how to fry it up, and it was actually pretty good. I don't keep too many rock bass, but I did, I guess, when I was a kid.
They're not bad. I once did the rock bass jamboree.
Did you?
Yeah, up near Algonquin in Whitney.
Okay.
They had to clear some out of the lake.
Is that Madawaska Lake or something there? But it's on the Madawaska system, right?
Yeah, this is like those landlocked, Hay Lake.
Okay.
And there was so many rock bass in there, they wanted to get some out of there. And so we had big fish fry with rock bass at the end of the event. But No, that's good. Well, you're teaching them already how to live off the land.
Oh, 100%.
Wow.
And, but just getting out there and doing that with him, I'm like, this is even fun, right? Like fishing doesn't have to be, slamming Arctic char in Nunavut, right? Or it doesn't have to be winning a tournament. It's just about getting outdoors and enjoying it, having fun. And,
well, I got 2 grandkids.
Yeah.
One's just younger than Hudson. It's 2. And then Sophia, Tommy, and then Sophia, she's 1. So I'm looking at these 2 little toddlers and I'm going, okay, I've had Tommy in the boat. Sophia hasn't fished with me yet. She's only 1, but that'll happen this year. But keep it interesting for them. And even a bucket with some water or a cooler with some water, and you put that panfish in there to let it swim around.
Right.
And they get to look at it from, a foot away and see this fish swimming around in there and how it looks in the water up close and personal. And, lots of snacks so that they don't get too hungry and that. And I'm telling you, it's hard to get them back inside when they're outside. I find anyway that they love the outdoors. Little ones.
Exactly what I did when I was a kid. We'd catch one off the dock, or my dad would catch a little sunfish, and we'd want to keep it, so we'd put it in the bucket. And just what you learn from just observing that, and just nowadays so many kids are getting onto the screens, right? Like when I was a kid, there were Saturday morning cartoons with like rabbit ears that you might not even be able to get. Now they got it on every phone and iPad. They can watch cartoons whenever they want. And it's like, I think that, kids are losing something, not getting those cooler outdoor experiences.
Well, here we are, outside of Magnetawan. You live, outside of town, so you're out here in the wilderness, but you're still close to a lot of, necessities and amenities and that. But Canada offers so many places for you to get outside and do things. Even if you live in the GTA, there's so many places surrounding it that are within an hour or 2 that are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And fish are everywhere. We got some of the best fishing in the world across Canada. And so the opportunity's there. And I do believe that COVID introduced a lot of new folks to the outdoors.
Right.
The big issue I remember hearing many times in the fishing industry was, how are we going to retain those people if they didn't have a positive experience in the outdoors? And hopefully a lot of them did, and now they're hooked, like you and I being outside. But one of the things is that as we move forward, we got to keep pushing and promoting the outdoors, because computers and cell phones and iPads and all those things that I'm accustomed to now as an old guy. Yeah. These young people, they're growing up with them when they're small. And they're used to them. I mean, I FaceTime my 2-year-old grandson all the time in Toronto.
That's great, though, isn't it? Being able to FaceTime.
He's eating his dinner, and I'm entertaining him, and doing funny things, and he's laughing away, and I'm going, the times have changed. But I think adopting that technology is nice, but being addicted to it and not even getting fresh air is tough, and there's a fine line, I have nothing against technology. I'm addicted to it like these young people, but I also know there's a time and place to just, put that cell phone down and go fishing for 10 hours.
That's one of the things you're talking about, was just getting out there onto the boat. That's one thing I like to, even though, a lot of the time I do have to film stuff, but, you're not attached to the phone, your emails. I don't miss, people say they get addicted to their phone, and, I'm guilty of checking emails and posting to social media and maybe spending more time than I should, but
because
I'm happy when I'm done with that, man.
Because in what you do and what I've been doing for so long is, we also do some work within the activity that we are involved in, right? So, having that there, you need it. It's a necessary evil.
Right.
But the thing is it's so nice. And that's why I like tournament fishing. Unless you have to make an emergency call, you're not allowed to, just phone your buddy, hey, how you doing on that side of the lake or whatever. You're not allowed to do that in tournaments.
Right.
So the cool thing is, unless it's an emergency and you're broke down or something, or there's something that has to be done, you can call the tournament director, get the okay to, call to get something happened, fixed or something. But for the most part, you're not supposed to be using it for just other
Right.
things. So it doesn't
Because
matter.
then you could have somebody else out there scouting for you and be like,
Exactly.
how's the fishing over there, Bill?
Get over here because
Yeah.
the fish are biting, and that could change, your placing in the tournament, and you might move up the standings or whatever. So it's pretty cool. And I don't know. I think that with the amount of time that you've spent in the outdoors, the amount of time I spent out there, it's also nice to have communication when you have that service available. A lot of places you go, it's only a satellite phone is the only way, right?
I've been using an inReach a lot lately, which is
texting?
just but the reason I like that is because I can keep it on my person, so I can tether it to my belt. It's waterproof, keep it in my pocket, where the satellite phone was often in a bag in my boat. And so then if you lose your boat, well, you lose your comms, right? So I actually not to say you shouldn't bring a satellite phone on some of these things, but I'm finding just bringing the inReach is the way to go.
And are you finding that when you're way up in Timbuktu, you're still getting great satellite reception?
I do, yeah. I noticed with my aerial drone that I used to film sometimes, it doesn't do the auto track when I'm quite a ways north of 60.
Right.
When I just whatever reason, it doesn't really hone into whatever satellite system it uses. But I do find with my inReach, because it's on the Iridium system. I don't know what's going on with the Global Star, but I know sometimes depending on what satellite network your device connects to, when you get up north, there might be times a day where those satellites are below the horizon. So they only will work at certain times, and you got to know those times, right? But with the Iridium system, which is what the inReaches are on, you don't have to worry about that. So that's the one people use in the north. So if you're bringing a satellite phone up to the north, you got to make sure you get your satellites hook up to a system that's going to work, because
we did a lot of trips where there was absolutely zero cell service, and we had satellite phones, but we'd always check on the coverage, the maps that show the coverage,
right,
and make sure that was a zone that they were able to get satellites and that, and it's funny how they're blocked in certain areas like Cuba, for instance. I remember taking a satellite phone down there on a fishing trip.
Yeah, I hear there's some amazing. Yeah, they just don't want people using them or whatever, right? They want to. Yeah, you did. I hear there's some amazing fishing in Cuba.
Oh, I did lots of trips to Cuba. For fun.
Yeah.
One we filmed at, and caught a bass, 11.5 pounder, my personal biggest, a largemouth. But we fished from one end of that island to the other, probably maybe 20 fun trips down there.
And there's some kind of remote places on the island too, isn't there?
Oh, yeah. In the hills, like in Cienfuegos, you've got Lake Hanna Bonilla. That's where the big fish are. And it's a mountainous lake. So it's in the mountains. And we used to, take a break. And this one guy we met that was swimming across the lake once with 2 different flippers that he had. It's like there's not a lot of money down there. And so he had 2 old flippers that were not even matched, and an old antique spear gun. And he had a whole stringer of tilapia and largemouth bass on over his shoulder.
Wow.
And he was swimming across the lake. We saw him in the middle of the lake, so we went over to the boat with the guide and said, hey, what's, talking to him in broken English and through the guide. And he invited us to his house, and we became friends with him. He lived in a little shack with his wife and baby on the mountain out there. And the only running water he had was one of the what would you call springs coming off the mountain.
Yeah.
He took bamboo shoots, cut them in half so they were troughs.
Yeah.
And zigzagged it down the mountain to run right through his house.
Brilliant.
Into a sink that was open here that the water just poured out.
So it just kept running.
Always.
Okay.
He had running water. He had little coffee plants outside, grew his own coffee.
Neat.
He had a wire hanger that he made into a coffee filter with a woman's nylons.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was the filter.
Yeah.
And he made us like this Cuban coffee that was like an espresso every time we'd come up. Put a little sugar in it and just down it, and it was just like an instant buzz. There's a lot of caffeine.
Sounds delicious.
Awesome. It was good.
Yeah.
Some of the best coffee I ever had was at his place.
Yeah, cool.
We'd take a break, and so over the years, we'd take them clothes and a radio.
Yeah.
And the radio that my buddy took him once. The next year we went there and he had it set up and he had wire all going up through the top of the thatched roof so that he'd get reception. And how he got hydro there was he ran wire, like basically just wire from a village that was on the other side of the mountain across the mountain. And it was just, very archaic and basic, but that's how he had lights in there, was from tapping off the main hydro line somewhere on the other side of the mountain.
Yeah, so he just laid his own kind of power line and connected it.
It's like Robinson Crusoe.
Totally.
That's
That's
pretty
wild.
cool. And dirt floor, and there'd be like chickens walking through and pigs walking through the house. And
must be nice when you don't get minus 30 winters, though, right?
No,
That's
it's
the thing. I'm just
tropical,
like, oh my God, how are they going to? I'm like, oh yeah, there's no winter.
And this
there.
guy was so happy.
Yeah.
And his wife at one point where there was barefoot and pregnant, literally barefoot and pregnant. Yeah. And that was, they lived just up the hill. It was, you had to walk up about 100 yards up the hill, and, there's palm trees and stuff around, and it was so cool. And we had a lot of adventures like that. We'd stay in the people's houses down there.
Okay.
Casas, and they cost like, maybe $10 or $20 a person a night to stay in. And we did like probably 20 trips like that, bass fishing all over the island. It was fun.
I don't think I saw one of your shows for in Cuba. Did you do
it? Did one in the late 80s.
Okay.
It was pretty cool. It was late 80s. That was the only one I shot in Cuba. And then I liked it so much, I said, I want to go fun fishing and look for a giant bass down there.
Yeah.
And since caught, another 11.5 pounder and, lots of other nice ones. But a lot of the fishing down there is pretty tough for bass fishing because a lot of the fish have got eaten because there's just not a lot of food, right?
Right. And then there's also people, not as many regulations, I guess. You can spear fish them and stuff like that. And
it's a valuable food source. The tilapia and largemouth bass in those freshwater lakes. And there's not a lot of lakes down there, but there's, several dozen, I guess, across the whole island. And the largemouth were introduced there many years ago by the Americans, like going back. I don't know if it'd be 50.
Oh, so they're not native.
No, they were brought down.
I learned a lot of bass isn't really native to a lot of water outside of the Great Lakes, even here in Ontario, and a lot of the backcountry lakes. At one time, they did a lot of stalking through wherever a train goes, like through Algonquin, and just for the fishing industry, a lot of Americans really like to fish bass, and so they kind of stalk them, and then were transplanted from one lake to the next, but they weren't as widely spread at one time at all naturally.
No, and there's bass in a number of provinces, not so much Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, a little bit of bass in Manitoba. BC and Maritimes, Quebec, Ontario have bass lakes. But it's funny how bass have got around, into Spain and Italy and China now, Japan. Largemouth bass have been spread around there. And it's pretty crazy to think how something can be introduced. But then look at the gobies in the Great Lakes and how they came from Europe. And
have those helped the fishery or made it harder to catch fish?
No, I think it's helped. It's made the fish more... It's made them bigger, and big fat bass now are pretty common. Smallmouth on the Great Lakes all over. They've gotten bigger and bigger by eating these gobies, because the gobies pretty slow minnow on the bottom, so they're easy to catch for the bass to eat, and it's. The zebra mussels have cleaned the water up, and bass, smallmouth are sight feeders, so it's helped the fishing. A lot of giant fish are caught 6, 7, up to 8 pounds, even 9 pounds.
A 9 pound smallmouth. Yeah, that's the Ontario record, though, isn't it?
Yeah, but there was one caught in Ontario waters somewhere over by Peely or by Leamington, but the guy was from Ohio and he ran across and caught it like 2 years ago, and it was 9 and change. And
so it's more. So it's on the line. There might have been a bigger one caught in Ontario.
Yeah, I don't know if that one was registered for Ontario. It might,
because 9 pounds is just absolutely insanely gigantic. That's like the Andre the Giant of smallmouth bass.
It is. It's such a, and I said earlier, a unicorn. But there's that's the thing about fishing is that we still have unicorns to be caught across the country. And people can complain about the fishing isn't as good maybe where they fish when they were a kid, but it all depends where you fish and what you're fishing for, because the fishing's not the same as it was when I was a kid or in the 70s or 60s or that, but it's still phenomenal. It depends on what you're targeting.
Right. And where you're fishing.
Like the bass fishing has got the average fish size is bigger now than it was when I was getting into this business.
Especially for smallies or for both?
Smallmouth, yeah.
Smallies, yeah?
Yeah, smallmouth.
You look at like Amick Lake. Well, that has a run of smelt. My wife and I, we do our date night in season. We go dip netting for smelt at night. Super fun. We do a big fry up. Extra I use for fertilizer even because there's no limit. And, that's an invasive species, right? And it's just wild because they got into Amick Lake in the 1830s when they built the Erie Canal. Mm-hmm. So the Erie Canal connects the Hudson River and Lake Erie, right? So technically that bypasses Niagara Falls. And once the smelt they'd run up the Hudson River and then they'd take the Erie Canal to Lake Erie. Once they got into Lake Erie, they could then populate, Michigan, Huron, Lake Superior, and run all the way up the Mag River into Amick Lake. Which they're resident in there now.
It's not a big lake, is it?
It's not a massive lake, but it's the biggest lake in the area by far. I think it's maybe 17 kilometers long or something.
See, but smelt, at least as far as I can see, would be good for a lake like Amick because
the problem is that now there's too much. So there's a great population of walleye, but they don't want to take your lure because they're all just eating all these smelt. So they're actually harder to catch.
Yeah,
apparently.
But that's good though because you'd get bigger walleyes if they smelt because that's a good bait fish for them to get big. But the smelt tend to roam around a lot, so the walleyes would be fairly nomadic, chasing the smelt too.
Okay.
And making them maybe harder to target other than maybe their spring spots just off where they spawn, you catch them and then maybe the fall run. But, summertime fishing on that lake might be tougher for walleyes perhaps with smelt in it. But smelt, I mean, any bait fish in any lake's a good thing because I've fished some lakes before where the heads are this big and the body's this big of the fish because there's no food.
Stunted.
Yeah, like the head is a giant head of what should be a 10-pound walleye, but the walleye weighs 6 pounds because there's no girth because there's just no food for it,
You ever heard of Pingalowit Crater in Arctic Quebec?
I've heard of, but I don't know a lot about it.
So I did this crazy trip up there where I crossed, the same year I did alone, I crossed Arctic Quebec. I walked from the Hudson Strait to Hudson Bay in winter. Took me 36 days, probably the craziest thing I've ever done. But along the way, I stopped at this massive meteor impact site that's full of what they say is the second purest water in the world. So it's like basically like rainwater.
Did you have a few drinks?
Well, yeah, I did. Well, I actually ended up meeting up with these Inuit people there, and they had so the ice was like 6-7 feet thick. So I went with them, and there was somebody else to help chisel through it because I did this expedition, a solo. It was me and my dog.
Yeah, okay.
But then they got in by snowmobile near Pingalowit Crater because they were there leading a trip with a bunch of high school age kids.
And they came across you and your dog.
Exactly. I'd already seen one of them before in town, so we'd already been acquainted, weren't expecting to bump into each other at all. So it was kind of like out of nowhere, hanging out with these people all of a sudden. So anyways, very pure water, very cool site. But at one time they know it was connected because the rim around the meteor has rebounded once the glaciers melted. So it's come up and then cut it off from the other rivers. I think the few other rivers, the Pavungnatuk and the Vachon. And so there's absolutely like hardly anything except like microscopic organisms to eat. So I forget the word they use, but like what you're saying, the most weird looking stunted landlocked Arctic char and lake trout you ever seen in your life. Like big head, tiny little like narrow body, but they still survive in there, which is amazing.
It is, but they're on this constant micro diet of non-fattening food and eating probably insects and whatever they can find in there. And very seasonal too, probably the food base in there. But it's funny how fish, just like humans, I guess, in a lot of cases, will adapt to what is available. Right. But it's not necessarily, and it obviously, our North American diet for the most part has got a lot of food that gives you this stuff here. Right. And not so in the case of that. I mean, that's those fish would probably see. It's funny because sometimes like big, overgrown, obese fish don't fight that hard because they got a lot of fat, not a lot of muscle. And then sometimes those skinny fish are so skinny and muscular, they either fight hard or they don't fight hard because they're either too weak or they're super strong and their flesh is very firm and they fight hard. So
that's why river smallies, some of the fish in the mag here, oh my God, especially when you're also sometimes pulling them across current, just the current makes them feel stronger.
But they're always working with current.
Right.
So unlike a Great Lakes smallmouth that's just feeding on gobies and that might be larger, lazier. Those fish in current are constantly working in the current, whether they're behind a rock or in the fast current, doesn't matter. They're always around current. They have to work harder, just like you when you're doing an adventure, and just like me when I get off the water and I hit the buffet. We work hard, but I feed a little heavier.
I hit the food barrel to try to find what sort of dehydrated food I might have packed for that day. But let me tell you, when you're out there, it tastes delicious, right?
I bet. Dehydrated food. I don't even know if I would know what it looks like, but I'm going to have to put some in the boat because after seeing the one episode with your brother there, where you were in somewhere in northern Ontario, where were you doing a river there with a bunch of, you'd cut your hand up there.
Oh, okay. So that was the East Puckasaw River north of Lake Superior. Yeah. So we were in from not too far from Wawa where we started.
Yeah, and you were enjoying some pre-cooked bacon, I saw, and some other meals. And I thought, I should keep a couple of those just in one of the compartments in my tournament boat in case I get stranded for a couple of days. But the problem is people find me. That's the thing. Right. They're going to miss me if I don't show up the way. Yeah.
I mean, you have to have some of those skills. It's smart for anybody to have some of these. I'm sure you probably have some extra rain gear or something in your boat, and you know what I mean, where you could get found or know at least how to light a fire. Like it's the law, even if you're fishing, let's say the Bay of Quinte, and you run into a terrible storm, don't be too afraid to pull up on someone's property, because if you're actually in danger, as long as you just sit there and wait for the weather to break, you're allowed to use people's property. It's just like you're allowed to portage on my property because there's a rapid up there. So I can't tell people, you close down the entire river just because I happen to live on a waterfall. I have to let people walk past, which of course I'm happy to do. You know what I mean? But I remember being on the Bay of Quinte one time. My cousin fishes it a lot, and he had this 90 tiller Honda, and we got into some pretty big waves. And I'm like, man, this is a whole other, these size bodies of water are a whole other kind of can of worms. And ever since that day, my cousin would just, before he'd even go out, he'd wake up, he'd check the wind. If the wind's blowing in this direction, over this, just go back to sleep.
Well, Bay of Quinte, especially in the Big Bay area, the waves are short, and beat you up hard, when the wind's coming out of the west or east, and it can get really choppy there. And I know a lot of guys that have gone through that very fast with bass boats, trying to get back, from the lake back to Belleville or Trenton and turn, and it'll beat you up in a bass boat going 40, 60 mile an hour through those waves, big time. But one thing I think that's important for a lot of the folks that want to, spend time on the water like I do, and spend time on the water and in the wilderness like you do, is just plain being prepared. And I carry a waterproof duffel bag in my boat on every adventure I go. It doesn't matter if I'm in Florida fishing or up in Lake Nipigon or on the Great Lakes, wherever. Yeah. It's got something, either waterproof matches or a fire starter in it. I've got things like gloves and a toque. I usually carry one spare set of clothes, even if I'm out there for the day. Spare set of clothes, spare rain suit, spare snacks, first aid kit, a flashlight, communication device of some sort, whether it's cell phone, a battery charger and stuff. A two-way, a VHF marine radio for the big water, so I can get a hold of Coast Guard and that. Because I spend a lot of time out there, and you don't know what you're going to come across, and people that might be stranded that need help or whatever. And I don't know how many boats I've towed in over the years, but I've towed in a lot of boats. It's just, you don't leave somebody stranded. If they're broke down and you have a motorboat, you tow them in. That's just the way it is. Even if you're in the middle of a tournament and it's going to cost you in the tournament, you have to do it, and that. But being prepared doesn't take a lot of work. It just takes a checklist and make sure you've got those things that you feel might come in handy, and through spare polarized glasses, because if you're out there for sun up to sundown when I'm pre-fishing and you lose your polarized glasses, that glare is hard on you if you're not used to it. And I'm used to wearing sunglasses, right?
Yeah, no, I've had that before where I forgot my sunglasses on a day like that, and your eyes are just red by the end of the day.
I believe that glare is amplified off the water, and I think it can probably be damaging if your eyes are used to the protection, but polarization, and I don't know, it's just common sense. But you know how many people underdress when they go out there with me, like corporate folks and that? They'll come out, and the first thing I do is that all you're bringing? And they've got a thin jacket and a t-shirt and shorts or whatever, and I say, listen, let me grab another rain suit out of the I've already got a spare. I didn't tell them about, but I'm grabbing another one out of the truck and throwing it in for them, because they don't realize that usually the temperature is colder on the water than on land. And
definitely going to get some more wind, and especially the larger bodies of water where the water never warms up to the same amount it would on an inland lake.
It could be 80 degrees on land. And if that water's only 45 degrees, you're like an ice cube bobbing on it, right? You
ever fished Lake Superior much?
A bit.
Nipigon River.
Yeah.
Like that has the North Shore Superior has plants that grow there that then they don't grow anywhere further north until you get to like the barren grounds.
I know.
Because of just the cooling effect from the lake allows them to still grow there.
In that North Shore, we did a show catching the coasters, the big brook trout.
Yes. Yeah. I was looking for that. Is that on YouTube?
Yeah, I don't know. It's probably on
because a lot of your stuff's on YouTube.
Yeah. So we shot a show up there, and we went out the Nipigon River into the lake, and then veered east to a little lodge on an island there. And we were only there for 2 days, and we caught so many lake trout and some big brook trout, and it was awesome.
And those are they're the ones that the coaster brookies, they call them, right? Like they get big.
That place we didn't see any other boats fishing. And I've looked on charts and extensively to see where can I launch and try areas that nobody's touching. And I've got a few things looked at. I want to explore too with a boat and just, do day trips, but maybe 50 miles this way or 60 miles this way, and just make sure I got enough gas.
Hey, if you're looking for a guy to come to fish the Nipigon River for coaster brookies, Bob.
Well, we'll put your canoe in the boat.
Oh, I'd take a motor.
And if we have any problems, then you can canoe back and get help while I keep fishing.
I think my biggest brook trout or speckled trout or speck, we call them here a lot, but was 5 pounds, and that's 5 pounds on the scale. Right so on. Like 7 pounds.
Hey, you know how many people I've met at consumer shows and seminars and in-store promotions. They show me that picture of that 5 pound fish, like bass or brook trout or whatever. Yeah. And I look at the picture and I zoom in if it's an iPhone. And I go, okay, that's 2.5 pounds. But they didn't have scales.
Right.
So it's a 5 in their mind.
I'm just going through how many times have I already lied to you. Like I think that walleye I said was 10 pounds. It might have been 8.
It was checking. It's gone now. You released it.
Right. But this one, and then my brother actually caught. So this was in Labrador.
Well, maybe it was one of the skinny ones that had the frame of a 10.
Well, so it's long. So you do the math. And you're like, well, a fish that long has got to be
30-inch walleye could be anywhere from 8 pounds to 12 pounds. Depends on what it's eating, right?
Yeah. You never know. No, my biggest smallmouth was 5 pound 2 ounces on an inland lake, but it was 21 inches long.
We're gonna have to go fishing and beat that one. We can go beat that one easy.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
I would imagine.
We could do that up maybe in the North Channel or something.
Yeah, I haven't. Maybe I just haven't had the best of luck. I find that I just like lose the big ones. Something goes wrong.
I think if I did what you do to get to some of these spots of all that portaging and that, I'd be too tired to fish.
Well, that biggest smallie was just off the dock.
Oh, that was here.
Yeah, not here, but it's just like a Bancroft area.
Yeah, right.
But then my brother caught. So this is in Labrador, where first of all in Labrador the water never really gets warm enough that the brook trout don't disappear from the rapids, so they're always swimming in the rapids. Plus the black flies are just horrific, so black flies are always laying eggs on the rocks in the rapid. So the rapids just all year long are just jammed with fish that are just gorging themselves on black fly larvae. And so, that's where you hear guys catching. We did this 33-day canoe trip. We went up, we started at Shefferville, we went DePaul, cut across a height of land to the George, up the George, over the height of land into the Adlatock. And my brother we hit like some really cold weather and the fish metabolism just shut down, and nothing was biting for 5 days. And we got to the ocean near the mouth and my brother caught a 7.5 pound brook trout. We think maybe it was a sea run brook trout.
Very cool.
7.5 pound. Then he caught a 4 pound. Then I caught a 15.5 pound Atlantic salmon. Which was the only reason you could do this in Labrador is because my buddy had his guiding license. He had his Labrador guiding license, so we could legally do all this. But it was like crazy.
I know.
It was like the most exciting thing I've ever.
They are airborne so much compared to other salmon. Pretty cool.
Yeah. It was wild. But they're one of my favorite, probably because I love bass fishing, probably my favorite, but I just the brook trout, I think they're one of my favorite because they're beautiful, but also because you got to work a little harder to get to them.
Yeah,
there's something like that.
Such a cool predator, though, because sometimes they won't hit anything, and other times they will hit anything, and so it's like they're temperamental, and that's what I like about them. And they are probably the coolest looking freshwater
They really
fish.
are, and one of the tastiest too. Let's be honest.
Yeah, the meat, depending on what they're eating, but that meat is sometimes bright red. And pretty good. Yeah, that's
so fun.
I think if I was in one of those Survivor type contests like you were in Alone.
Yeah,
a brook trout would be nice, a little bit of lemon, olive oil on it, but I'm not sure you had those garnishes.
I really like that video where you're up at the fishing tournament near Manitoulin, and you had the native guy do cook up a trout, and they use sumac instead of lemon. He's like, we never had too much citrus, and so we use sumac, and it tastes extremely lemony,
Right, I thought that was pretty cool. It was actually very nice. It was good. And I never thought of that prior to him showing me that day when we shot that video. And who would think of that? I mean, it's just something.
That's why I'm like, why don't I think of that? That would be so smart. I'm having a fish fry with shore lunch in the backcountry and getting a little sumac and putting it on the fish. Like, great idea.
Yeah, might have made some of those BC fish. You needed there was nothing you could use for seasoning out there that you thought of, Yeah. When you're in BC.
Yeah, that's because I love my fish, Chris. I love my Old Bay. You know what I mean? And there was just like pretty much nothing. Except for hunger, which they say is the best seasoning.
I guess.
Yeah, but we boil it.
I always said, we're having like a fish fry and a shore lunch on a shoot, or we got a corporate function and we cook a bunch of walleye and then I said, everything tastes so much better outside.
It does.
But I'm not so sure if I was doing a contest like you guys won, if it would taste better or it just tasted. Period. I'm not sure. It would taste good if you're really hungry, no matter what you're eating, I guess.
So there are exceptions to it always hunger is the best seasoning. So some of this stuff didn't taste good even when we were starving. So you could imagine how bad it would taste.
Did you cook the slugs or eat them raw?
Well, I cooked them, I boiled them, and then roasted them to try to get the slime, because it's just the texture of the slime that's really, really good. It's not even the taste. It's just this like gooey slime stuff, which is like incredibly sticky and horrible. I'd need a whole ton of them. I had one bin. We're talking about, they're like banana slugs. So the suckers are like big giant banana slugs, right?
Yeah.
And I kind of had fun with it. I filmed myself eating one, made up a little song. I'm like, we're gonna eat a slug. Here we go, and just like close up, just to try to gross people out.
Yeah.
And I think I end up grossing myself out.
Well, you know what? Yeah, you know, I'm actually getting hungry, but I'm not thinking slugs.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like brook trout, grilled or wrapped in tinfoil, baked. I mean, I don't know about the slugs, but it's funny, I guess, when you're forced to survive like that, you have a different outlook on a lot of things in life. In your case, I think everybody should go through a little bit of extreme things in their life, and as long as you're not life threatening, especially people watching this and watch what you do. I mean, if you're not experienced at canoes or kayaks or going through rapids and stuff, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, and obviously I'm sure you've had
you got to start small, but look at all the people that fast. Various religions do fasting, and there is something where you do get a kind of clarity through fasting. And when you're actually out there trying to live hand to mouth, you're absolutely right. It does kind of give you a clear picture, especially when you're kind of branched away from society. You kind of learn certain things about society, about what you're thankful for in your life that you take for granted, and you learn them in a way that it becomes deeper than what can really be explained by words. What I mean?
I know. It's so funny because after talking to you today, and obviously seeing some of your videos and stuff and what you've done in your life, you do come to appreciate the simplest things in life. And that's one thing I remember, hey, I grew up poor and life's been pretty good throughout my career. It didn't start out that way. I mean, the first 10 years of my career, it was hand to mouth. I mean, if I didn't win enough at tournaments, I'd sleep in my car or whatever, I couldn't afford a hotel, whatever. But that's just normal stuff. I mean, that's not roughing it. That's just a little bump in the road.
A lot of people that have been able to follow and turn a passion and live the dream, what you do is inspiring to a lot of people for sure. You're a humble guy, but a lot of them have had to go through that, like sleeping in their car kind of. I know I went through some serious hard stuff to be able to, be the full-time adventurer,
But it's after experiencing roughing it or maybe not having a lot of money or whatever it might be. I remember, fishing with this guy in the oil business. He was in his boat, but we were, at the same tournament. We got to know each other in Magog, Quebec, and a couple other tournaments he was around. He'd come up from Texas in the oil business. Obviously, was very wealthy, and this is in the early years of my career. And I remember bringing out some Turtles chocolates out of my boat, and hey, here, try one of these. And next thing you know, he couldn't believe how good they were. He'd never had them before.
Yeah.
And here's a guy that was, worth hundreds of millions of dollars. But the simplest thing in life was this chocolate at that time and place.
Yeah.
And I've seen that too many times where we're having a shore lunch, which I've had hundreds of, if not too many of them. and I'll be with people that have never had them, and they're just eating the fish going, this is incredible. It's the best fish I ever had. And I go, it's all right. But, I've been there too many times that I get a little bit jaded or used to it that, hey, I know it's good, but to me, it's just another day at the office. And so I think a lot of times you have to smell the roses when you're out there and realize, and it's taken me years to do this, though, Jim, is to smell the roses and appreciate stuff, because for a lot of my career, especially the last sort of 30 years, it's been really good. The first, 15 were 10 to 15, it was tough slugging. I mean, it was not a lot of money. We didn't know anything about how the TV worked or any of that, and we had to learn as we went. But I've learned now to appreciate every day you're out there in the fresh air, no matter what you're doing. And people that are watching this have to realize that you can do the extreme stuff or whatever, like tournaments or going in the wilderness like you do for extended periods of time and that. But the thing is, do it at the level that you're going to enjoy it, right? Because a lot of people, I think, jump into things,
Right.
and it's a negative experience, even if they take up a sport like golf or something, and that, like you had
That can be frustrating.
Your golfer's elbow. It wasn't from golf, I know, with the tendonitis. You were talking earlier about that before we started the show, but a lot of people get frustrated if they're not hitting it well. Well, that's repetition and lots of hitting and discipline to get better at something like that, just like it is in the outdoors with whatever you're pursuing. And take those baby steps and then go as far as you want. And that's what I like about it. Doesn't matter what outdoor activity it is to push as hard as you want to push. And to me, that's tournaments. For you, it's whatever, how far you can go, or how hard you can go, or how many fish you're going to catch when you stop, or whatever. You've got all these sort of things in your head that you'd like. Doesn't always happen that way.
No.
That's what keeps you coming back, though, right?
Sometimes things work out perfectly. And I think it's also not just the skill. It's also the ability to be able to go out there and realize, well, it's raining, but I know how hard it's raining, and my rain gear is good enough that I'm not going to get soaked and I'm not going to get cold, and I'm going to stay out here and fish, or I'm going to push on another 10 miles to get to that perfect spot by that big waterfall that's just loaded with fish, right? And I think, or being able to deal with bugs. You get somebody who's never seen a mosquito before, they're going to be freaking out, where, when you have a little more experience, you'll be standing there with them buzzing. Nobody likes them, but you're going to be able to deal with it a little bit more. And I think the more you get out, you put somebody into this more extreme situation, just the discomfort is going to be like, what the hell am I doing out here? And so that's why I think people need to maybe start not throw themselves into that and get turned off by the whole sport, right. And start a little bit slower.
You mentioned rain. I actually like fishing in the rain, but I know a lot of folks don't. I mean, I've been with tons of people that say, "Oh, are you going to stay out through all this?" I'm looking at them going, "I was going to, but if you want to go out, I'm coming back out." And I don't know. It's just I take the good, the bad, and the ugly when I'm out there fishing because it is what it is. And I like to always see if I can catch them when it's windy or it's not the right conditions. I like to challenge myself on how to get these creatures to bite certain lures and things. And it doesn't always happen, as you say, but it's fun to try. And that's challenging. But you can't take it. You can't take somebody with you that hasn't that drive and expect them to have fun, because, if you're not catching fish, and you're fishing, like if I'm fishing like a madman, I'm not catching, I'm still having a good time because I just like the challenge.
Right.
My expectations are very high. Don't get me wrong. They're high on catching, but it all depends on the conditions. When the fish are fairly active, I expect to catch a ton of them.
Right.
And I'm not going to quit till the sun goes down. If I can, stay out there and nobody's telling me I need to get off the water or whatever, I'm going to stay out there. And that's the way it is. There's nothing like coming in as the sun's already gone down. You go, I couldn't squeak out more out of that day.
Well, that's like the best time too, is there's that one time where everything goes crazy, where right almost kind of last light, I guess, where the sun goes down and everything starts feeding like
brook
that.
Trout, walleyes, a lot of species, low light. That's when they feed most. And so you're hitting that peak feeding time, early hours, late hours when the sun's going down. And you can capitalize in ice fishing for walleyes. A lot of times the best action's the first 45 minutes and the last 45 minutes. But during the day, it's pretty slow.
See, you get it. My mom didn't get it when we explained why we couldn't come home for dinner, because they're like, Mom, the fish are hitting when it's last light, know? And she's like,
Nothing worse for me. I'll be in a tournament now. Fish are turned on in that last hour of the tournament, and you've got 50 miles to run the weigh in, and you go, okay, I've got 1 hour and 5 minutes. There's a 2-foot chop. I'm not going to be able to go faster than about 50 miles an hour. I better give myself some leeway, at least 10 minutes or 20 minutes leeway, because I don't know what's going to happen. It might be rougher down the lake. So I better haul it now and run. And to me, that's a bit of an adrenaline rush, too, as you're looking at your watch, your GPS timing, you're going, cutting it close, and you get in with like 40 seconds to go.
And if you
just run 50 miles
Yeah.
wide, like fast as you could during those conditions, and you gave yourself, you thought enough time for 5-10 minutes, and you got like, 40 seconds.
and you're just close. And if you don't make it to the deadline,
it might
you can't
cost
enter.
you've paid entry and all the expenses. Now it might have cost you a paycheck,
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
And I do that for a lot of meetings too, and corporate stuff. I cut it close like I'm fishing a tournament, and it's not pretty. I get caught in traffic.
Doesn't
I'm 15
always
minutes
work.
late for an appearance. It's not cool
Right.
if it's working with one of my sponsors and I'm late for a meeting or a public event,
Right.
or a corporate event where they're all there. And I've done that too many times in my life. I don't know why, but I like cutting things close.
Right.
It
Keeps it interesting.
Yeah, but I do that with flights too.
Yeah.
It's not cool when you miss
Uh-oh.
flights, especially
No.
now with all the security levels and customs.
That
and
can be
stuff.
stressful.
Well, yeah, it has been, but I laugh about it. But everybody traveling with me shakes their head and said that they'll travel by themselves to meet me at the airport now.
I'm going to be honest. I'm not the best with these things either. Best or worst, whichever way you look at
Well,
it.
there's not a lot of time. There's not a lot of clocks when you're out in the middle of the bush or
There's not.
wilderness, is there?
No, there's
Yeah,
not.
you're looking at the sun, right?
Yeah, you kind of get a good enough idea, right? And
Yep. Yeah. Well, you could be like one of the native guides I fished with years ago. You used to get a lot of tips this way. See, he'd have all these rich Americans fishing with him. This is way up in the Yukon, I believe it was. And this native said, I get a lot of tips. And I said, how do you do that? And he goes, partway through the morning, I look up at the sun. I go, wow, I can't believe how hot it is for 10:42 in the morning. And I look at their watch and like I'm always right on. But he always would take his hat off and he'd wipe his brow, and he had a little digital stick in clock or watch thing in top of his hat. And he'd look at it when he was wiping his brow. And he'd do this 2 or 3 times during the day and be exactly within the minute. And these rich guys would be freaked out, and they'd tell all their friends back at the lodge and the other guys in other boats. He'd get big tips.
So they all thought he just had like this ancient native wisdom, but he was just messing with them, basically.
Oh yeah, it was awesome. Or like the guy
That's
in BC,
great.
one of the guides there. We just got introduced. We jump in the boat. We're running down the coast out in the ocean to go salmon fish. See that rock in the hill? And I said, oh yeah, He said, it's been there a long time. I said, all right, thanks for that. Thanks for that knowledge. And he just laughed.
Yeah, right.
And another guide trick. This is with all guides. How far is it where we're going? Like, because I'd always wondered, are we running an hour or half?
Right.
Oh, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. Everything's 10
Everything's 10 minutes. Yeah.
It's pretty funny how their clock is nothing like a normal person around, civilization, like cities and that. When they're spending so much time in the outdoors, they don't really.
Well, it's about safety and the weather. It's not about exactly what time we can do this and what, you know what I mean?
They want to get you there, get their job done, catch some fish, and they're not worried about how long it's going to take to get there or get back. They just want to make sure it's a safe, good day and catch fish.
A different frame of mind.
I know.
It makes more sense when you're in their frame of mind, but sometimes people that don't understand that,
it's hard. If you live in the city or you're very regimented in your job, I mean, time is everything. You got to do your work. But in their case, they know that they've got from the morning till sometime in the late afternoon to put you on fish, and they got to make it all happen and maybe a short lunch in there and that. And so they, their tips and business require success.
Right.
So not worried about, whether they're a little late getting to the spot, as long as they get there and the fish are biting.
Bob, is there anything that if you take like let's say younger people or anybody that wants to try to get into the fishing business, the fishing industry, and through tournaments or whatever content, television, and try to make this their life in the way that you have, are there any suggestions that you could give them?
Well, first off, and I'm not a good example of the marketing end of it for education, because grade 7 was the best 4 years of my life. No, it wasn't. I almost got through high school. But then I found out that work was a bad 4-letter word. No, I did work. I worked very hard in my early years, and even when I decided that I would get full-time work, I worked in a factory and that for a few years before I started fishing for a living, 45 years ago or whatever. Like, I think it's 20. So, I guess it's been 45. So, anyway, I would say marketing is good because it gives you the sort of general idea of how business works. And that's so important because, nowadays, like this podcast and your videos and that, a lot of folks like yourself are, doing some monetization through video content and podcasts and that. And you have to gain an audience. The other thing is it's hard, but you have to try to figure out how you're going to separate yourself. I grew up in an era of traditional media, of TV, radio, magazine, of which we did all of those for, more than 3 decades. So there wasn't the internet. Nowadays, there's so much good content out there on the internet that I would suggest that you learn as much as you can from the people that are doing well through whatever part of this, outdoor business that you want to pursue. So if you see, folks that are doing very well, try to see what separates them. And sometimes it might be just their personality. It might be what they're doing. It might be a little niche that they carved out. And when I look back, our TV show of the almost 1,000 episodes was very general. We'd film a tournament, or we would do fly fishing in Tasmania, or we would, go to the Amazon and fish peacock bass. But I did that for a reason, just to entertain myself in a lot of cases. I wanted to keep it all over the map because we never could figure out in the years we did the TV show who our viewer was in Canada. Because you got to realize when we started in the 80s, early 80s with TV, there was no internet. There wasn't even cable or satellite TV. It was antennas and TVs at first. And then cable came and satellite TV and all those things evolved. So we had a captive audience because there weren't a lot of outlets to watch TV shows and networks. There weren't that many networks. The Greater Toronto area might have had, 10 or 13 TV stations, a few ethnic stations, and then, ones coming in from Barrie and Hamilton and Peterborough, and then, the GTA stations proper and that. So we would be on maybe 3 of those stations. We'd carry our show in that market. And so they were forced to watch us at some point if they had the TV on, because there weren't a lot of choices. Especially Saturday mornings when there was either infomercials or maybe religious shows or fishing shows. In our case, we were the only fishing show in those early years. And then others started as the years went on. So we kept our show to appeal to a wider group of people then because we knew we could get them. So it could be the little old lady that would never fish in her life, but she just liked it because I laughed a lot. It might be the guy that's a keener that liked just trolling for salmon and walleye on the Great Lakes, but he'd see those shows in our series. Or it might have been the guy that liked to bass fish, or the girl that liked to fish, walleyes, or whatever it was. We tried to get more mass appeal. That's harder to do, except with what you do. You do something that is more mass appeal, even for folks that will never do it. Like me at my age, I don't really want to go and survive on a 500-mile trip, with a snowmobile or a canoe or something and rough it. But I am intrigued to see somebody do it. In my case of fishing, there's so many things that you could specialize in fly fishing or just extreme fishing where you're fishing for just big saltwater fish, or you're going to areas that don't see any pressure in, the thousands of lakes and rivers and stuff we have here across Canada. You could just do that and shoot videos and be very unique because there's so many opportunities. Or just do competitive fishing like I like to do. You can do any angle you want and have some success at it. But I think that to do in fishing just something generic, it's tough. So you got to skew it towards extreme or beginners or out there where nobody else is, something different or species specific. just trophy muskies. That's all you go for, or whatever, or giant sturgeon or whatever. And just like that river monsters guy, right?
Yeah.
And I think he does a wonderful job, but don't get me wrong when I say that, I don't think a lot of the stuff he does is extreme.
Right.
When he starts talking about the big channel cats and stuff, I'm not worried they're going to eat me or something. No. But he portrays it like they're monsters.
Right.
And
it's not just really a fishing show. It's more travel. And, he pretends like he's trying to find, there's a mystery and he's trying to solve probably they know what the end's going to be maybe, but they take people on an interesting story along the way.
Well produced. But I laugh because I've done so many of the species he's gone after, not all of them, but some of them, and I didn't think it was life-threatening or they were monsters.
Right.
They were just another game fish, but it's portrayed differently. But once again, he found a niche that went crazy and gave him millions and millions of viewers worldwide.
It's cool. It's just it's not a show for guys that want specific fishing abilities and skills to go out there and do it somewhere close to their house.
Kayak fishing.
Yeah. Oh, that's another one. Yeah, that's blowing up.
Lots of great, videos on kayak fishing and things. So it's like there's so many options out there in that, and YouTube has really allowed people to go after it. And it doesn't require the money as much as what we did in the early years with, all the various expensive video cameras, 3/4 inch and Betacam SP and all of the things right into the digital world.
Also having to buy time and worry about get so many sponsors as well, which are mandatory.
Well, and that's kind of why the YouTube makes more sense than traditional TV, because traditional TV, you did have to buy your time.
Right.
And you had to get sponsors because you were basically buying that time. Now you had to go out and sell sponsors.
If they even let you buy the time.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
And then once you got on, then you had to make sure you filled those 30-second ads and had enough margin in there that you could pay salaries and equipment costs and editing and shooting, all that. So it was a different time. Now, in the early years, we started TV shows. In the early 80s, it was all barter. So we didn't buy our time in the early years. We would get some CBC stations like Windsor and CTV stations and different stations around the country.
Yeah.
And in the U.S. too, where we'd barter our show.
Right.
Like WUAB in Detroit and stuff, or not Detroit, and the big one in, I forget what it was, in Chicago and in Michigan. So we would get these stations and just barter them. They would keep half of the 30-second spots. We'd keep half, and they would sell theirs to local advertisers, and we would sell ours to national advertisers because we had stations all over North America. But those days ended when the infomercials started, like the slice 'em dice 'em stuff and K-Tel and all these things that would be selling things, and the religious shows were buying their time,
like the Hour of Power and stuff.
Yeah, when they would buy their time, all of a sudden these regional TV stations would say, wow, we don't have to have Salesforce trying to sell those spots like to that bartered show we're doing, or that farm show we're bartering, the guy's doing, and this gardening show. We're going to make them pay for their time just like those, and they own all the half hour, and they figure out how to sell it, and we don't have to have salespeople out there grinding away selling Saturday morning or Sunday morning time slots. So I saw that evolution early, and that changed the whole business model from us, because in the early years when we didn't know how it really worked and how good it was really good. We had that time to sell, and we didn't have a big upfront cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars to buy the time.
Must have been a lot to put all that together, and especially what you're saying, you didn't have a big we're in a trust fund, baby. You didn't have a big nest egg to say, just to be able to put that together and build out a show and a business like that in fishing, like that's not easy.
Well, it's chicken and egg. What comes first? Because you need viewers, numbers to get advertisers, and you don't get them by just starting out of the blue. The advertisers look at you like, well, prove us you're going to do well out there. So it took years to build that trust up and relationships up with the Mercury Marines and Columbia Sportswears and Ranger Boats and all these companies. And actually those companies I've been with for a long time. Like Ranger and Mercury, basically my entire career, 40 some odd years.
Yeah, wow.
Columbia Sportswear, it's got to be pushing 30 years. And that's tough when you're starting out because you need to build relationships up and trust with these companies that you're going to help them move product. And, as crazy as it sounds, in the early years of our TV business, we learned that, these companies all want to sell product, plain and simple. So you need to include that in the shows to make sure that they're getting the right exposure because they're paying for a 30-second ad, but they're also paying for the endorsement and the use of the product. And you better believe in the product you're using, just like you with, I know you use like a specific type canoe, right? And you want to make sure that canoe is right on for your adventures because you're not going in there with a bargain basement canoe, right?
Wouldn't work out so well, probably, right?
Well, I think you would get part of your adventure done till the first rock you hit.
Turned into a backpacking trip pretty soon.
Yeah, backpacking. Maybe. Yeah, you better make sure you got a good backpack sponsor. But no, it's a lot of it is just being real, tell it like it is, and finding where your market's going to be. And that's the toughest part is because the biggest thing I used to get all those early years of TV shows. Yeah. The biggest thing I'd get in fan mail when people would actually, lick a stamp and not worry about COVID and send a letter instead of an email, and that they'd send you letters. And I used to get these stacks of letters every week at the office, and it was crazy just trying to keep up with answering it all. Yeah. How do I start a fishing show? That was the biggest thing I got out of all those letters if I had to take one thing. And the others was, have you ever caught this? And what kind of lures do you recommend for this and that? But I'd say the single biggest thing would be how to start a fishing show.
Right, yeah.
Because there was no internet to start something easier like you can do now because the channel is there. There's no airtime cost, but now you got to come up with content that's going to hook those people to watch.
And so there's no 2-line answer on how to start a fishing show, I suppose.
No, it's pretty much, just, hey, see what you can put together. And in this day and age, see if you can get some views on it, I guess. And the funny thing is I'm not really focused hard on social media, even though I should be focused harder on it, is, at my age, I realize it's very important and I've learned to do some of it. There's a lot I still need to learn, but I understand it's important, even with all the branding I got as being that fishing guy for so many years from traditional media. Yeah. It's a different ball game now. Yeah. And it's so funny because we put up a little TikTok video yesterday with some cool music.
What's your TikTok, by the way?
I don't know, Bob Izumi. I'm not sure. Yeah, Bob Izumi, I think.
I follow you on Instagram too, which is pretty good. Real Fishing Show.
Yeah, that would be at Real Fishing Show, I think. But I think it's Bob Izumi on TikTok. So we put one up yesterday on the electric outboard, the Avatar for Mercury. And I shot a couple video clips last Sunday at the boat show in Toronto. And we used that Electric Avenue song. Yeah. And, I looked at it this morning and there's 12 or 13,000 views this morning. And we just put it up yesterday afternoon. Nice. And it's funny how crazy things can go. Now, we were always in the, over 100,000 viewers, like on Global and different outlets that we aired our TV show on. Every airing would be, it'd be 60, 100, 120, 80, whatever thousand, just on the one station Saturday morning.
They're watching the whole show. They're not just scrolling and watching a TikTok video. It's a little bit different quality of viewer.
No, but then there's a couple I got on there that have over 600,000 views and that. And it's funny how it works on social media. It's so different, with everything involved and what they're picking up on and seeing in that and what people want to see and how it works and how some of them go viral. But it's a different world than traditional TV that I grew up in because now there's so many TV networks, unless it's, big time concerts and football and the Masters and sporting events and world news and that. Traditional TV, I'm sure they're hurting now trying to figure out how to compete with what people can find on the internet.
For sure. Yeah. Like, I mean, YouTube is even a bigger streaming platform than Netflix. And I remember one of the comments I got, I did my Nat Geo show. They streamed it on Disney Plus, and, it didn't really work. They did 4 episodes. They didn't renew. And I was kind of like, oh, one of my followers said, he's like, well, Jim, you already have a show. You're on the bigger stream. If you had a show on Netflix, why would it be any different than on YouTube? 85% of people watch your stuff on the big screen. Just keep on doing what you're doing and control everything yourself. I mean, that's one of the beauties about what you did with your show. It was your show. You didn't have to answer and say stuff you didn't want to say or do things you want to do, and no one owned you, kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and the good, the bad, and the ugly that come with being in social media and having anybody can just shoot you a note.
Right.
And if it's a bit of a hater type person or that's negative about things, they got the right to do it.
Hurts your feelings sometimes.
Yeah, it does. But
sometimes my wife will see me there like texting like, oh yeah, but she's like, what are you doing? I'm like, nothing. Because you just don't. You can't let it bother you.
But you know what? So this thought came while I was driving up here. So my dad, my grandparents came over in 1899 from Japan.
Wow. Yeah.
So my dad was born in BC.
Yeah.
And all my relatives that were in that era of Pearl Harbor, including my dad and stuff, they got put in concentration camps, working the sugar beets and to work on a highway and stuff, right in southwestern Ontario.
Your dad got put into those?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. He was born here though.
Born in Canada, and his grandparents came over in my grandparents came over in 1899. His parents.
Yeah.
So the funny thing is he had no bitterness of that, losing his possessions and being put into these camps working and that. No bitterness at all. But you know what? He wasn't a big guy or anything, but to the day he died, he didn't take any crap from anybody. He wasn't afraid of anybody.
Right.
He'd stand up to anybody. If they were prejudiced and said, oh, using the Japanese term there and that, he didn't care. He was pretty much callous to the point of and hard-nosed that he was an incredible person and was generous, like I said, to all the neighborhood kids and community and stuff, and did not have a penny when he died. But I'll tell you one thing, don't think you're going to get the best of him, because he didn't take crap from anybody. And it was kind of neat to see that, because as a kid, I didn't even know I idolized him till he was long gone and I got older, and because I was like early 20s when he passed away. But when I look back at it and I saw some of that prejudice too growing up, and so that kind of has made me laugh, because I never used to get a lot of negative letters with the TV show. I bet you I got maybe less than 10, but whatever, out of thousands of letters. And they were about, why aren't you wearing your life jacket?
Oh yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah. And I would always explain to him, if it was calm and I felt safe, I wasn't wearing it. Or if I was in shallow water, I would.
It's in the boat. Oh,
I always had enough for in the boat, usually 2 per person. But anyway, a couple like that. And then a few on why you're releasing the fish. They were people that went through the Depression. And the odd ethnic one. But I grew up through that more when I was younger, being Japanese looking, even though my mother is Scottish English.
Right,
so, I'm very technical, but I got short arms, with the Scottish. Okay. So anyway, but I used to get a lot of that because I'd look, Asian to a lot of people and Japanese.
Right. Yeah.
So I guess when I see any negative stuff in social media, on some of the posts I've done, which not a lot, but if I do, I actually laugh about it.
Right.
And that, because I go, wow, it's a different age we live in now, because that keyboard's right there. You want to type something and maybe you're having a few cocktails or just having a bad day, and bang, you want to rifle something off and say it. That's fine, because I'm not that guy. I would never do that to anybody. No. Even if I didn't like what they were showing, I'm not going to start chirping, because I'm just not that guy. But you can throw it at me all you want, because it ain't affecting me, man. It's going off me like water off a duck's back, and I ain't going to lose 1 second of sleep over it. But I do know that it does hurt people out there. And it's sad that we've grown, now we're in a world where people have access to type something that's really derogatory or really slanderous to that person. And it might be jealousy. It might be, I don't know.
A lot of jealousy involved. Just a lot of people think it's funny. They're just trolling. They just want a reaction, messing with people, or they're projecting their miserable people and they want to make someone else miserable.
And you know what? It's sad, but I'm,
or maybe they're right, you know?
Yeah, maybe they're right. I mean, and you know what? I love criticism.
Right.
I mean, if it wasn't for friends and family around me that have given me good criticism over the years, I would have done stupid things or said stupid things, but they'll say that's not right to say that. Even back before, we're all supposed to be politically correct.
Right.
When you could get away with some funny jokes that might be not so funny now. I would always have people tell me, maybe you shouldn't say that or that. And I'm good with that. You know what?
And
tell me what I'm doing wrong.
And sometimes it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You just might not know something until someone tells you, you know what I mean?
I'll tell you one thing. If you know, I'm open to always keep learning. And that's why fishing is like that. If you think you know a lot about fishing, well, walk in my shoes for 40 some odd years and realize after you've been in it full time for this long, how little you know about it. Because there's always more to learn.
So much, man.
Always more to learn. And just like you, when you're back there in the wilderness, you know there's some other survival techniques.
Oh, guaranteed.
Or maybe some spices for your fish that you might want to do.
Yes,
you know?
absolutely.
You know, it's just, there's always something to learn. Always. And that's one thing I would say to anybody watching this. Please keep an open mind when you're watching somebody on their channel or whatever they're doing, or you're trying to get good in this hobby that you want to turn into a profession or at least a fun hobby and do it more of. Just learn, because one day you'll be out there and the light will go off and you'll go, I better do this because somebody told you that might work, you know, under this circumstance. I love it. I mean, I like trying things out there that all of a sudden you get success with and you go, why didn't I know this 20 years ago?
Could have used this. Yeah, that's how I was with the wacky worm. I'm like, why didn't I think of this? And next thing you know, I'm just slamming all these bass. I'm like, this is amazing.
Too simple, but it's effective in clear water.
Wacky rig.
And you know,
Senko.
So the long answer is for anybody that wants to get involved in fishing is to learn as much as you can before you make that first step into it. And then realize nothing happens overnight. The only thing that happens overnight in this world of the internet is this. If it's sensationalized big time and goes viral. But believe me, for every viral video, there's millions that aren't, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you see it in your numbers. You see some videos you think are going to be spectacular, and then others that you think are mediocre. And the mediocre one gets that many hits, and the one that you thought was going to be spectacular is a third of the hits. Right?
Yeah, and no idea why.
Yeah, I don't know either. That's why TV was always pretty steady. People just had to move their rabbit ears around to get a clearer signal, and they were watching, right?
Absolutely. Wasn't so many places to flip to. Yeah, that's awesome. So keep learning, have a thick skin, and go to where I get niche down. I guess you're saying, try to make it specifically about one kind of genre within the fishing space. Just
find your do what you like first off. And that, because it's tough, and also you have to think of, what is the longevity going to be if you do well at it? Because nothing lasts forever except sort of what you're doing and what I'm doing, other than when you physically can't do it anymore, it's going to come to an end. But the thing is that you picked and I picked things that we can experience and bring up other generations, like Hudson, for instance, your little guy, to do, as long as we're physically able to. We're gonna keep pushing. Where some things, some of these guys that do extreme stuff, man, they could hurt themselves pretty bad, right? And for the most part, that could happen with anything. It could happen with fishing. It could happen with what you do. But for the most part, if you plan it and just try to have not too many unforeseen things and that, you can have a long career. But I don't know, man. It's I laugh when I think how many years I've been at this and I'm still at it.
Yeah.
And I'm still loving it. Although I've changed direction. I decided 2021 to quit the fishing show, the TV series after 38 years, because I wanted to fish more tournaments and I wanted to do more promotional work for companies. And, I'm still working for 10 or 12 companies.
Nice.
Working, but I'm also getting to fish as much as I want. And that's what I love to do. So
Nice.
kind of come full circle.
Absolutely. Any it's winter time now. You've been to some pretty cool fishing destinations all over. Is there anything that you would recommend as a place to go in the winter that's warm, where you can get into some good fish and get out of the snow?
I got a bunch of friends in Costa Rica right now, and they were shooting me pictures on WhatsApp yesterday, and some pretty cool fish.
Nice.
And they're catching, Cubara, snapper, and sailfish, and rooster fish, and all kinds of things down there.
You ever tried Bolivia, where they're catching those big? What I forget what they're called. They fly fish for them often. They're almost like a Dorado.
Oh, Dorado! Oh, yeah, lots of Dorado. Very good eating too.
That looks like a fun adventure.
Great eating on the barbecue and fun to catch. We've got them fly fishing in the ocean. A lot of times you'll get them trolling, so you get them to come up after a teaser that has no hooks, skirted lure, and then you'll throw a fly out. You'll bring in the teaser and throw a fly out, and then you'll hook up with them behind the boat. But we've got those all over the world, actually, and Bahamas and
Dorado. I didn't know that. I thought they were a freshwater species.
Oh, you're thinking of the freshwater Dorado.
Yeah, like the ones I see guys fly fishing for. Well, I saw them in a river.
One.
Yes.
Yeah. Like a tiger fish with the teeth.
Yeah. But I never knew maybe they ran up rivers. But I see guys fishing for them in rivers.
That was one of the ones on my bucket list.
Yeah.
When I was doing the TV show. Now, not so much, because, you got to go to Argentina or somewhere to catch
Bolivia,
them.
I see a lot of guys catching them.
My brother went to Argentina, not Argentina, might have been Bolivia now, but he did catch them, and he says pretty amazing. And I didn't do those in all those years of doing the TV show.
Yeah, right.
But those things are pretty wild. You catch them on both artificial lures and fly fishing.
Cool. Yeah.
But there's those type of extreme trips, and of course I like Florida bass fishing during the winter. I always get down there.
Okeechobee.
Yeah, Okeechobee's favorite lake of mine. Some of the phosphate pits, and then fished all over, as I said, Cuba. You can saltwater and freshwater fish there. Remember to take lots of tackle with you, because there's no tackle stores. Never seen tackle for sale ever in the trips down there. So got to take it. Did a lot of trips to the Amazon. Buddy of mine in Montreal I was talking to this morning. They're just getting ready to go in 2 weeks.
Cool.
It's about his 10th trip to the Amazon for peacock bass. And he's taken another friend from North Bay that's been there now 2 or 3 trips. And that's a great one. There's a lot of options to do. It's just saying, okay, I'm going to go for it.
Right.
And that's what life is, Sometimes you have to just go for it rather than just talking about it. If it's in your budget and you can afford it, just go for it. Just try it.
I love that.
I always had that, even when I couldn't afford it when I was poor.
Me too.
I just did it, as you did, right?
I put too much on my credit card. It took me forever to pay it back, but in the end, I don't regret those experiences.
Oh yeah, I purposely, when I was younger, didn't have a credit card, and because I just did it. If I had the cash in my pocket, I could do it. So I never ran up a credit card bill in my life I couldn't pay. But
smart.
But there were times, I'll tell you, I was driving home from a tournament going, okay, I got to go work somewhere, do something to get enough money for this next tournament entry fee.
Yeah.
And I guess a hotel was out of the question because they didn't win anything at the last one, right?
Yeah.
And so they were back of the car, I'd sleep and that. But there's something about being hungry that's good too when you're starting out in any business. Because if you're hungry, you work harder. And there's just something about, hey, maybe it'd be cool, but I never had that opportunity. But if somebody gave me a pile of money and said, "Here, Bob, go do this business," maybe it would be fun. But I've never had that opportunity. I've always
you wouldn't be driven. You wouldn't be so driven because you wouldn't have to.
No, you would be. You would be like, okay, well, I guess I'll do this and I'll spend some here and do this and that. but there's something about hand to mouth and hungry that's kind of fun, and I don't think you even know you're hungry when you're doing it.
Yeah. But it makes it more fun in the long run to be like, I actually did it. It was hard. I was sleeping in my van, and then boom, I did it in the end. It makes it even sweeter.
Yeah, it does. And a good friend of mine, he passed away not that many years ago, Ron Joyce, who was with Tim Horton. So he was the guy that took it over after Tim got killed in a car accident and built it into a $1 billion plus business. And Ron and I used to fish and do a little hunting and some fishing, on a few trips here and there, and we're good friends. And Ron was an interesting character because he came with, I think, $10 in his pocket from Nova Scotia to Hamilton. Delivered produce for 2 companies, worked as a policeman at the same time, and then bought a Dairy Queen franchise, and then got in partnership with Tim when he only had a handful of stores, and then grew it into this giant chain. But Ron came from humble beginnings, no money, and I used to talk to him. We'd be fishing for sailfish in Florida or something, or down in Mexico fishing or hunting turkeys or whatever, and I'd pick his brain about things and find out how they did things and how he grew, from $10 in his pocket to where he was being a bona fide Canadian billionaire businessman.
Wow.
And you know what? It was always interesting because that guy did things his way. And, he was a wild man in terms of, like, he lived life to the fullest. He went hard. Yeah. And he said to me once, he said, when I was a cop and I was delivering produce for Ippolito and this other company and that when I was younger, he said, I only need an hour and 45 minutes a night's sleep.
Wow.
I said, what?
Yeah.
And Ron partied hard and he was like, right up until his 80s. He loved his vodka and stuff, but he just, that's how he attacked his life, was go hard. Yeah. And I just could not believe that an hour and 45 minutes a night was all he needed.
That's wild.
And I witnessed it like when he was in his late 70s on some of the fishing trips, and around 80, I remember him, we'd go to bed at 3 a.m. to be playing cards and stuff. And all of a sudden he'd be knocking on my door, and at 6 a.m, and we just went to bed at 3. And I'd say, are you up, Bob? And I'd pretend I would say, yeah, what's up, Ron? The coffee's on.
Yeah.
And this is like when he's like 80.
No wonder he's so successful. He doesn't even need to sleep. That's like a superhuman skill.
Yeah, he's working double shift, triple, quadruple shifts.
Now they're saying I used to push myself more like that and sleep 4 hours. And now you hear all these things. Oh, you got to have 7-8 hours. And there's scientists coming out and saying, oh, that's important. Which, obviously they have a point. But this guy still lived, your friend still, lived he didn't die at the age of 50. You know what I mean? Like,
no, he got into his 80s and went very hard in life, working and playing, and just that was his life. And in any week of his life, you could write a book about it because he just do crazy things. His fishing boat was a 74-foot custom Donzi sport fishing boat, and he had helicopter and jets and
other level.
Another level. I mean, it was amazing. Yeah. When I go with a little jaunt with him, or my wife and I would join him somewhere, it was like, okay, this isn't real. This is only for this many days. Right. Don't get used to it. But it was fun to do, And I remember my wife thanking him at one of his Christmas parties, as he was getting up in age, and just saying, Ron, I just want to say that Bob and I really appreciate all the things you let us experience with you, because it's at a different level. It's like it's so not normal to
me. It's like from the movies.
Like us, that's not normal. But it's just something to be said about jumping on a helicopter or a jet, or his big boat was a 140-footer.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, it cost, back when gas was cheap, it cost like $90,000 to fill up.
Wow.
Yeah, it was, but you wouldn't know. Right. Honestly, he was the most humble guy. When you got to know him, he's the most humble guy, generous, and it was so neat to hang with him because my friends are all over the map. There are guys that are laborers in factories, that the fish tournaments, to guys like guys like Ron that have got up the top of the pinnacle, money and that, they're all over the map. I don't look at somebody and say, oh, wow, they're worth that much. I want to be the friend.
Right.
I don't care what they have. I just care what kind of person they are. And if they're fun to be with and they're like-minded, not all my friends fish.
Right.
Some of them are just, they like cooking like I like doing, or they like golfing, which I like to do a bit of. And that's just how it is.
They're just honest people though, too. That's important, right?
Exactly. Guys like yourself. I mean, I could see being a friend of yours, even though we just met, even though we talked on the phone, is because you're real.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's no sugarcoating.
Yeah.
You're transparent. You say it like it is. What you see is what you get with me, unfortunately, if you know me very well, but that's it. I say it like it is. And I guess at my age, there's no changing. So it's pretty much it's a done deal,
Well, I appreciate that. I guess we could start wrapping this up now, but I did have one more quick question for you. We talked about people looking at fishing, potentially going down south. Do you have any interesting ice fishing tips, maybe for guys going for walleye or lake trout that might want to go out tomorrow and try?
Well, check the ice, depending on where you live. You might be watching this where there's 5 feet of ice, or you might be watching it where there's 4 inches of ice. I would say move around a lot. So, I don't like sitting in one spot when I'm in a boat if the fish aren't biting. So why would you do that ice fishing? So I'd suggest, taking a couple of augers, punch a lot of holes, shallow to deep, different types of structure, different areas of the lake. Maybe even use your cell phone or mapping on your sonar unit if you have one, where you can see where different structure is. And move around to find biting fish as opposed to wait for fish to come to you. Just go to where you can, find some and catch them. And it's just putting the odds in your favor. It's sort of like fishing a tournament is, sometimes being more efficient and covering more water, you might catch more fish. There are times when you got to wait them out and catch those fish that are not biting, that are beneath you. But there are other times where you can find other fish that are actually actively feeding.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Bob. Thanks very much for coming out. It's an honor. It's good meeting you.
Yeah, my pleasure, Jim. And next time we meet, we'll be on the water.
Sounds good to me.
We'll be fishing, okay?
Awesome.
Yeah, right on.